outside yourself when you have all of the world inside.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, your heart is a sun, and it shines as it opens.
Well, your heart is the sun, and it shines as it opens.
Yeah, your heart is a sun, and it shines as it opens.
Well, your heart is the sun, and it shines as it opens.
Yeah, your bones are the earth, and they sing with the mountains.
Well, your bones are the earth, and they sing with the mountains.
Yeah, your bones are the earth, and they sing with the mountains.
Well, your bones are the earth, and they sing with the mountains.
Why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside?
Why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world
Say,
inside?
why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside?
Why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world
Your
inside?
mind is a space that creates your horizon.
Well, your mind is a space that creates the horizon.
Your mind is a space that creates your horizon.
Well, your mind is a space that creates the horizon.
Say, why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside?
Why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside?
Why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world
Why would
inside?
you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside?
You know, you can feel it when you look inside.
Internet mic check 1 2 1 2 3. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. We'll be going here in a few minutes.
It's no surprise. Say, why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world
Why
inside?
would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world
Say, why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world
Why
inside?
would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside?
Why would you look outside yourself when you have all of the world inside? Inside, all of the world inside.
Girl, I know your friends think that we're crazy. They just haven't seen love this plainly. When they ask what on earth is going on, just tune your record in and play this song. 'Cause to me our love is like an old-fashioned finest whiskey poured out in our glasses. You are something sweet. Sip you slow, then repeat. You're the habit I thought I could be, but but old-fashioned love's got a hold on me. Baby, I don't care, I don't think I'd even mind between holding your hand, what I'm feeling in the bottles of wine. Cause you just might be something that could stick. Well, at least I put my money down on it. Cause to me our love is like an old-fashioned finest whiskey poured out in our glasses. You are something sweet, sip you slow then repeat. You're the habit I thought I could be, but old-fashioned love's got a hold on me. Old-fashioned love's got a hold on me. Go. We've been around enough to know that what this world really needs is something like you and me. Bitter with a touch of sweet, cold but it goes down with these old-fashioned.
I think we'll get started. It's 5 minutes past. Is that okay with everybody? Only if you say it's okay. 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 Alex, can I get that first presentation up? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we're going to really test the coffee this morning and start off with something a little bit more technical, and then we'll move on to some guests with some fun topics. So I'll start you off with an update on the research and development and really tell you about the science and technology that goes behind Canadian Angus genetics, okay? So we've had these selection tools for quite a long time. You know, we've had in-herd ranks, and then we developed across-herd EPDs, and now we have GEPDs, genomically enhanced EPDs. I'm so sorry. I should start off. I'm so excited about telling you everything I do at the association. I should start off, though, with some housekeeping. I'm so sorry about that. If you need translation, there are translators in the corner here. They have headsets, and we'll be happy to translate for you in French or from French to English. So if you need some translation service, please help yourself to that. Okay, back to what I was saying. Research and development. So GEPDs isn't enough anymore. And luckily for you, you all picked Angus to raise. And one of our competitive advantages is how much research and development we do, and how much science and technology we do develop for you to use, should it be right for your program and should you wish to use it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So we're adding accuracy to our genetic evaluations. So that's one of our goals, to make our breeding tools more precise. So adding accuracy, making genetic evaluations for new traits, and we're going to talk about why these new traits are becoming more and more important. The next two speakers are going to talk to you about greenhouse gas emissions, about fertility, and efficiencies. And so we're developing genetic evaluations for new traits that kind of help you address these things. And then we're also developing new technology like where, you know, you all use calving cameras, most of you. We're adding AI to those calving cameras so that those calving cameras aren't still dependent on you monitoring them. They're doing more for you. They're able to recognize when a cow is in estrus, when a cow is about to calve, when a cow is lame. So we're adding AI technology to the cameras to give you a way to have less labor, more precise breeding tools. So that's what I'm going to talk about this morning. Stop me at any time if you have questions. I'll take this opportunity to introduce you all to Nikki Westerlin. Nikki is from Neogen, Canada. Please take a look at that pretty face. Please stop her anytime you have questions about the lab. I know she wants to engage with all of you. So some developments that have happened in terms of DNA technology and some updates for all of you. First and foremost, what most of you use, parent verification. We rely on that for a lot, including the accuracy of our pedigrees. What we've done is doubled the number of SNPs that's available in the parent verification test. That means that we have less discrepancies, less ambiguities. We're able to identify the sire even when they're full sibs. It gives us more power and more confidence. We also added sex verification. So now if you have mislabeled a sample, missampled an animal, if the lab made a mistake, we're able to identify it very quickly. Hey, you know what? The sample isn't even from a heifer. Obviously, there's a mistake. Let's get a new sample. So hopefully that makes your guys' life a lot easier when there are mix-ups. And then Angus Gs Test, for those of you who use it. We've expanded that panel as well. So now the Angus Gs Test has more SNPs on it and is more predictive. The only thing I'll bring your attention to is the timeline on the slide behind me. If you're doing the Angus Gs testing or parentage, please note that it does take the lab 21 calendar days, because they work through the weekend. It takes 21 calendar days before we get the results back. And the member service girls are really good. They get the file from the lab, they've uploaded it that day, and they've got you your results. You get the email before we even open the file. So the turnaround at the office is fast, but the lab takes 21 days. And if you're waiting for Angus Gs tests, the actual results that you're waiting for, they come through the genetic evaluation. So you've got to give us time to get those results into the genetic evaluation. And I only say this so that you're not disappointed or frustrated when you're doing the Angus Gs test and then you expect results back next week. Please just don't do that to yourself or to us in the office. We'd appreciate it. Any questions so far? Okay, I talked about making our genetic evaluations more precise so that you have accurate tools with which to make breeding decisions. This is just the number, and this was just from July last year that I pulled the stats, the number of records that go into our genetic evaluations. We have over 1 million animals genotyped in our genetic evaluations. We have almost 10 million birth weight and weaning weight records. But you will see that there are some traits that we have less records for. Docility, foot scores, feed intake, carcass quality, actual carcass, that is, not ultrasound carcass, but also ultrasound carcass. You'll see how the numbers drop off. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit and tell you what we're doing to try and improve that so that the genetic evaluations for those traits also grow in terms of data density, in terms of accuracy, okay? So I talked about those traits that have less phenotypes. Some of that comes, it biases the data set. It comes with attrition. You know, calves are born, it's very exciting, you take birth weights. You're processing them, you take weaning weights. And then we start to drop off in phenotypes as the calves get older, right? We get less yearling weights on calves. Some of them you've culled, but sometimes because yearling weights are optional, sometimes not everybody's putting them in. And then if you think about all the other traits, mature cow weight, docility, foot scores. Not everybody's putting them in. Not everybody's taking the time to take them. So there's attrition in those data sets, and that creates skewing. So I understand why. Labor is very short, and your time is short. I understand that. And more, as we've grown these evaluations, we've been asking our members, well, can you take this? Well, can you take that? Well, can you measure this? Well, can't you put this in? Well, can't you enter it into Angus now? And we understand that that's a burden. So we've designed a few research initiatives to kind of support you on that. So we're going to have some interns that are trained scorers that come and help when you're processing cattle and take scores for you. Maybe that gets you comfortable with taking scores yourself because you can practice with them. Maybe it just gets some of your animals scored for you. If that's what helps, then that's what we're going to do. So that's one new initiative through R&D that I wanted to talk to you about. It will make sure that, traits are measured, traits that are subjective, kind of like feet. Sometimes members call me and say, I'm not really comfortable, or can I text you some pictures? Can you tell me what you would score this animal? And I always say, well, as long as you're consistent through the whole group, it will be fine. But I think it would help if we had people out there that are trained to do this. We're also working with vet techs and ultrasound scan technicians, so that there's more people out there that are familiar with all the phenotyping that we do. Kind of went through that, but our goals are foot scores, so foot angle, claw set, teat and udder scores if it's possible, body condition scores, docility scores, help take DNA samples if necessary, scrotal, okay? We want to expand this to a second phase of the project, and that's to collect ultrasound and actual carcass quality. Right now, some of the packing plants are really, they have really good relationships, especially with Miles, and share carcass quality information with us. But without parent verification, it's really difficult to use that carcass quality in the genetic evaluation because we can't tie it back to Angus genetics. We can't tie it back to the sire. So part of this project is to actually DNA test and parent verify the calves that we get carcass quality on. It's also to help people ultrasound scan more, and in the genetic evaluation, because we have both carcass quality from the abattoir and we have ultrasound scan, but ultrasound scan is an indicator trait. It's not the actual trait, right? The actual trait is the carcass quality at the abattoir. So we use a correlation, and the correlation is about 70%. But that was calculated about, what do you think, David, 75 years ago? 35 years ago? I'll say about 30 years ago. So we want to update those correlations, because when we use a correlation or any estimated value in the genetic evaluation, what we want to do is make sure it's accurate, because it impacts the accuracy of our predictions. So if you're one of those members that does want to select based on carcass quality, then it's my job to make sure that the selection tools that we give you for carcass quality traits are as accurate as they can be. And so one of the things is to make sure we ultrasound scan animals that we're also then going to get abattoir carcass quality information for, so that we can update those correlations that were calculated maybe 30 years ago, before my time at least. The project also includes making sure we take cores from steaks from all of the carcasses, so that we can have tenderness scores. Right now, you only have a tenderness CPD if you do a genomic test, and that's just based on the genomics and very little phenotypic information. So what I'm saying is we have projects on the go. These are new projects at Canadian Angus that are based on really strengthening that phenotype database that we have, and not putting the burden on you to always collect those phenotypes. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. The third part of this project is taking feed intake and growth data, growth measurements on cattle, so that we can strengthen the residual average daily gain or feed efficiency, EPD. Some of you have used it. Some of you have paid really big bills soon for feed. And this will become more and more important. And the next two speakers will speak to that. But just if you didn't know, if you do an Angus Gs test right now, or if you are measuring feed intake on your cattle using GrowSafe systems, then we include that information in our genetic evaluations, and you do get an RADG EPD. The RADG EPD describes for you the genetic potential for an animal to grow based on constant feed. So 2 bulls, same amount of feed, one's going to grow more on that same amount of feed. That's obviously not my genetics, but bulls have it. I was thinking Miles would be here this morning and would talk to this a little bit more, but one of the projects we're working on, and actually, Bart, this is your student that's coming on, your master's student that's about to graduate that's coming on, Tess Mills, that's going to be the project coordinator for this project. But basically, Miles is working on a marketing program for Canadian Angus so that our customers have a program within which to market their Angus genetics, something that brings value for the investment that they make in buying genetics from all of you. And so a part of that program will be a centralized place for best practices. And something that's very easy to find and adopt, and then third-party verification of those best practices, so that we're creating a value and a story for you. And then Miles's mission is obviously to create market pull for that story through that verification and through that commercial program. So Miles is definitely driving it and knows more about it. Please engage him. But the best practices will come from a program that will be coordinated by Tess Mills. Okay, I alluded to this at the beginning, but one of our projects is working with adding AI to cameras. So the program can provide you the cameras, but the program can also just use the cameras that you have already invested in, like your calving cameras. Most people want to expand that repertoire of technology and buy cameras from the company. The company is called One Cup AI. They have a really easy to use interface, which I really like because it can get big. So you can see here, I'm going to just show you a few slides of their interface and what they can do. But basically you can log in and you can look at all the cameras that you have on your place. And they've been working with Starlink so that the cameras are connected no matter where they are. And this is limited. Actually, I should say this was limited. 2 years ago when we started working with them, I couldn't quite get the cameras connected wherever I went. I went to a couple of places for members here, and it was a struggle. I'd have to go back the next week and then unload the memory card of the camera, so it wasn't real time. Now, if you look, I took that screenshot, can see all the cameras real time. And even at night. And actually, when I score feed, I prefer the nighttime cameras. They just are so clear. But let me show you what she can do. So she identifies animals, and her animal ID is so accurate. And she even tells you when she's not accurate. So if you look at, I'll just see if I can go back. I didn't add this. Yeah. Do you see it says tag ID 15E 99% on the screen? She tells you, I'm 99% sure. So you can you can actually create a threshold where she doesn't tell you unless she's 99% or more sure. And she does facial recognition. This is how it actually all started, was facial recognition. Because tags fall off, or there are livestock industries that don't use tags or want a different kind of recognition. In the EU, they use all facial recognition for pigs. The pigs have 2 EIDs, a passport, and facial recognition. That's how tight their traceability systems are. So this is how it all started. Tags fall off, we need a way to figure out what the cow is. So Betsy, that's the name of the AI system, she learns what the cow looks like. She uses hair swirls, she uses dimensions of the face, and she learns this cow looks like this. And then she reads the tags and associates them both together. So now you have a camera and an AI system that uses those cameras to monitor. She recognizes what species that she's looking at: human, sheep, camel, bovine. Then she recognizes the individual animal for you, and you can pull up the individual animal. So what we're doing with them is training them, because these are technology people. These are AI specialists. They don't know what will bring value to you to have the system. So that's why they partnered with Canadian Angus, and what we're helping them do is train Betsy to recognize this is a foot. And then what they've done is 3D modeled what's a foot score 1, what's a foot score 2, what's a foot score 3, all the way to 9, and taught Betsy, no matter what angle you look at an animal, this is always going to be a foot score 1. So now when she looks at this, she's going to say, cow 15E, foot score taken this date, these were the foot scores. And she'll do that for you over and over again. She's also learning how to score teat and udder. She's also learning how to tell you when a cow is about to calve. So now you're not having to stay up and wake up and do checks on your camera. She'll just text you and tell you, hey, look, I've been watching this cow and she's showing signs of about to calve. It's been 20 minutes. You should probably get up. She uses the same sort of training technology as you would use, as Tesla uses to learn how to drive a car. Any questions about Betsy? Should I go back? I know I skipped some slides, but I kind of wanted to show you that she shows you how much accuracy she's telling you that information with. So that, you know, if it's a cloudy day, if there's too much mud, if she's telling you, hey, I think I saw 38W, but I'm not sure it was 38W because something was in the way, you can say, okay, ignore the record. Tell me when you really get to see her. And she's watching all the time, so she'll get to see her again. So we're hoping that this kind of technology that we're helping develop ends up helping you, creates less labor, more value, more time. Any questions about Betsy? Hi, Earl.
I just have a question. If you did have any cameras or any investment so far in a program for this, what kind of dollars do you think you would be looking at? Say if you had a
Sure.
cow herd, do you have a rough idea just what the cost would be?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I can see a benefit here as far as labor and whatnot, you know, reduce that. So I'm just trying to figure out how much this costs you. You guys not.
Yep. So remember I said that they've partnered with us to develop this. They have an early adopter program. So I won't say they're on the Walmart shelves right now, but they have an early adopter program. One of the things that's required for us to train Betsy is a lot of footage. So the early adopter program allows us to access footage in different locations, test things. So you have to know, if you sign up for the early adopter program, it might not work 100% like if you bought something online. However, it's $250, no, $295 to get all the equipment to you, however many cameras you need, and then $99 a month for maintenance. So it's really reasonable, I think. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Earl. Anything else? No, per system, for the whole ranch. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, you had a question too. Yeah, so one thing we're teaching Betsy is what lameness looks like. So I don't know if you know, but if any of you have dairy experience, they have gait scores or lameness scores. So right now we're letting Betsy watch tons and tons of videos because dairy has done all this work and collected so much video footage on different lameness, and so Betsy's watching those videos, learning all the indicators of lameness. And you know, when we first started doing this, and my PhD supervisor actually does a lot of work in lameness, so I knew a little bit, but I didn't know how many little subtle ways a cow will tell you there's something wrong with my foot. But there's so many little subtle body language ways that a cow can tell you something's wrong here. And so Betsy's learning to pick those up. And because she's AI, she's machine learned, she'll learn. And then you can ask her, you can query, how did you learn this? And she tells you what in the videos she noticed, what's different in these videos for this score compared to this score. So it's been phenomenal. We're working with some vets on this, and like I said, Dr. Karen Orsel from UCBM, she's, I would say, the expert on lameness and digital dermatitis, so is really helping us make sure that we develop a good product in that terms. She also will tell you, you know what, 15W hasn't come to the water trough. If you have a camera at the water trough, she doesn't come to the water trough in 2 days. Might want to check. So hopefully things that are useful and valuable to you, that make life easier for you, and help with things like time management and labor shortage, monitoring. Any other questions? Okay, I've told you about a lot of projects, so hopefully I'm not overwhelming you or boring you. So I did say, yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned Starlink on it. Does that
Yeah.
mean that it has to be hooked up to a Starlink?
No. It will work with whatever, thank you, that's a good point. It will work with whatever network you have on the ranch. Starlink is just one that they've been working with because they've really expanded in the last 2 years. So people that have slightly more remote places or want to make observations in a field that's not close by home, they're finding Starlink works the best, that's all. So it's just a recommendation, but if you have some other provider that provides connectivity, that's that will work. That connection and internet and Wi-Fi are the same no matter who your provider is. Maybe the quality is different, but yeah, absolutely. So basically, all the camera needs to do is you have a little box in your office, which is Betsy. That's the actual processor. And then she needs to be able to talk to the cameras. She needs to be able to see the cameras. And she's actually really cool. She can actually zoom in on cameras that can zoom in. The cameras that they use are made by Reolink, and they move. And so she can zoom in, and she can also move angles. If she's thinking, I want to look at this cow, she can focus on that. Or if you want to. You can pull up a cow tag and make your notes. And the interface that they're building, it's simple and easy to use, but it's a clean way to record things. And then what we're going to work with them to do is then to just do an upload like you would if you were using Herd Tracks or Herd Master, where you can just upload that information into the Canadian Angus database. So, you took scores one day. Okay, put all my foot scores into Canadian Angus. So hopefully make things easier for you. Hi, David.
The
Yeah, and can you imagine the parent verification you have because she's seen that calf be born. She started recognizing that that calf with that hair slick or that hair pattern was born from this cow. She knows. So no calf switching, Betsy knew. So the advantages are phenomenal. We're in the development stage. I want to tell you, as excited as you can tell I'm getting about it, we're working on it. It's technology. There's always things to work on, bugs to work out. This year we had a huge problem with Amazon Web Services where, in the cloud where the data is stored. Last year in COVID, we had a lot of problem getting the memory chips for the cards. So technology has its difficulties and challenges, but it's a really neat project to be working on. I've learned so much about AI and machine learning and what can be done. And I think in agriculture, we're always the first to use them. There's people in the city that are like, ooh, I have a car that drives itself. And I'm thinking, we've had GPS in our machinery for a long time now, So I think there's space for it in our industry. Okay, so I talked about some new traits, and Stan, I didn't notice.
All these systems are based on a fixed camera, not a moving camera?
So the cameras that they use, the Reolink ones, they actually move, and Betsy can move them, and you can move them too if you log into the interface and you want to look at something, but they are statically installed unless you move them. Not drone footage yet. Okay, I can barely log in and move the camera around. I don't want to try with the drone, but I'm sure, look Stan, this technology is so much bigger than even what I know. I'm sure it's possible. And if you come to Lakeland College, they have a smart farm there, and I know they're doing projects on drones. Yeah. Okay, so I told you we have an RADG EPD. We also have a DMI EPD. I think it's really important to make sure that, I tell you what, maybe we should talk about the DMI EPD this afternoon after you've heard some talks from Dr. Lartner and, is it Dr. Macleod? No. Mr. Macleod? Okay, sorry, I may have upgraded you there. Docility, closet, foot angle, heifer pregnancy. We haven't had a heifer pregnancy EPD or a fertility EPD, and I'm going to talk to you about why fertility is so important. But we have a heifer pregnancy EPD. If anybody doesn't know what that describes, please come see me or put your hand up. I can help everybody understand in mature weight. So that repertoire of EPDs is really growing. So I want to make sure everybody is aware of all the new EPDs that we have. If you're not aware, or you don't want to learn, or you're intimidated by looking at all these EPDs, I completely understand. That's a lot of traits to try and balance. Some of them are antagonistic. Some of them make little impact. Some of them make huge financial impact. Some of them make long-term impact, and some of them make short-term impact. So some of them depend on your goals, but it's really difficult to balance all of this. And so we have a project, the results are available now, and the index is public, and hopefully some of you have seen them. I know some people have called me about them. We've discussed them at length. A lot of people are genotyping because they want to access the balanced index, but the balanced index is called the Canadian Balanced Index. And it's called balanced because it includes both maternal and terminal traits. Okay? It helps balance those antagonistic relationships. If you want a single trait select, the individual trait EPDs are still available. They're there for you to be able to drill down to. But the Canadian Balanced Index gives you that benchmark, that first look at an animal. And it helps you manage those antagonistic traits that maybe you haven't looked at before. So it really helps with the single trait selection. An economic index just means that it's a summation of the EPD for a lot of traits, all weighted by the economic impact of that trait in a commercial operation. That's all an index is. So this is an economic index. It's in dollar value, and it includes a lot of traits weighted correctly, weighted for the impact of that trait in a commercial operation. The weights aren't always linear. So sometimes people call me and they say, what's the weight for mature weight, or what's the weight for weaning weight in the index? And I said, well, that's actually a more complicated discussion. How much time do you have? Because bigger isn't always better. The economics don't tell you bigger is always better. For example, for calving ease. Once you have 100% calving ease and you have no assisted births, what's the point of pushing calving ease more? You're going to actually compromise on other traits like growth. So for calving ease, for example, as your calving ease EPD goes up, your index goes up to a certain point. And then how much your index goes up gets smaller and smaller. Same with milk. You want milk. You want those calves doing well. David just said, getting up, suckling, getting colostrum, having nutrition, that's really important. But after a while, it's not adding any more to your weaning weight. It's actually costing you in feed. And that cow, how much she milks, you have to feed her for that maintenance energy all year round, not just when she's milking. So after a while, that's costing you more than the pounds you gained in weaning weight. So your index will go up as your milk EPD goes up to a certain point. And then it will stop going up because you don't need more milk. It is no longer being profitable for you. So the index helps manage all of this. Math that even I wouldn't sit there and do in my head, let alone imagine somebody's going to sit there at a bull sale and do in their head. Okay, he's great for yearling weight, but what's his milk, and what does his dam look like, and how are her udders, and all of these things that you have to make. Oh, and what's my budget? And what's that guy bidding on? That's a lot of information to have to balance. So the Canadian Balanced Index, it's economic, it's based on economics, it's balanced, and it's a really good threshold. It includes a lot of weights, a lot of traits. So it's an all-in-one. I have some articles in the Next Angus Life about genetics and environmental interactions. This is an all-fits one. But how many of you buy an all-fit one cap and it works just fine? Whether you take the label off or the sticker off or not, it works okay. So it's good, a really, really good starting place. Okay? Any questions on the index? Like I said, it's in Canadian dollars, so a bull with, a 250 index versus a bull with a 150 index, that's $100 difference per calf in profitability for the commercial customer. Morning, Trevor. Yep, now everybody knows. So, I was at Goal this year. Thank you, Belinda, for inviting me. It was so much fun. And then I realized that, my first goal was in the same place 12 years ago, and some of those juniors are now having children of their own. And maybe one day those children will come to Goal. And I was thinking, this is like So much longevity. My longevity EPD should be really big. Anyway, I was talking to a member and we started having the same conversation. I don't know if EPDs really work. I bought this one bull and he didn't quite work out how I thought. And I don't know if those EPDs work based on my one bull experience. And so I talked to Miles about it and he said, why don't you validate them? I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. It took 12 years. So this is what we did. We have GEPDs on 140 bulls, and I followed their calves in the commercial sector. And I split those bulls into low, medium, and high performance. And then I just took an average of their calves' performance. And so this table shows you the results of that. So, by the way, for birth weight, the high performance bulls were high birth weight bulls, okay? Just so you have that right. So you can see that for birth weight, that was, the EPD was predictive. The GEPD was predictive, right? On average, calves from low birth weight bulls weighed less than the high birth weight bulls. For weaning weight, on average, calves from low birth weight bulls weighed less than the calves from high birth weight bulls. And for yearling weight, the difference was almost 100 pounds. Calves from low yearling weight bulls weighed less at yearling weight. So those EPDs were predictive. Hi, Stan.
Just a question, we have the averages in each of those categories. Is there any notion of the range?
Yeah, I was thinking I should have made one of those bar graphs, the ones with the tails, so that you could see the standard deviation a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah. Yeah, I can add the tails on there just to see the range. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Hi, Patrick.
Just wondering, were you using the EPDs that were initially generated for those sires, or was that like retrospectively looking at the EPDs now?
No, because they were bought by commercial producers, it was at the time of sale. Yeah, good question, Patrick. Yep, okay. Yes, Earl.
Explain this to me again here. So you took 140 bulls. Now these were bulls at random, or how did you get this?
Yeah. Sometimes when you want to do a project like that, you have to work backwards, Earl. So what I did is I picked commercial producers that take this data and would help me with that.
So you went through your program to find out people selling, you're selling bulls. They sold these commercial guys, and all of those bulls were like those.
Yeah. Yeah, so random.
So those weights you got were based on their selling price, or?
No, they are actually commercial producers that weigh their calves. Yeah, yeah. But the bulls were random because I picked those producers, like I worked with those producers after they'd bought the bulls. So it wasn't like the purchasing decision was, ooh, I better buy good bulls this year. Kojal's going to ask me for weights. Yeah.
One other question, maybe I don't know if it fits right here or not, but so when I'm analyzing, EPD, so let's say the AI company folks keep coming out that so the EPD numbers are not big weaning weights. So those numbers, they're coming out with those numbers are just getting higher and higher.
Yeah.
But utilizing them, say, high weaning weight EPD is not, to me, it's not increasing the weights. Like, my point is, the EPD numbers are going off the charts, and we're not changing too much on weights, really.
So this difference is about 50 pounds, and the spread on weights is about 50 pounds for weaning weights. Like when you look at it, just to put it in perspective, so a difference in birth weight EPD of 4 pounds You know, sometimes people will call me and say, this bull is a +4. I'm like, well, just for perspective, that's 4 pounds more on average. So if our weaning weights have gone from 20, breed average, right, to 60, that's 40 pounds. The difference just in these calves here is 50 pounds. I think sometimes, you know, when you're looking at the weaning weight, looking at one number, it's on there, it just, the difference looks so big. But then when you're looking on the scale and it's a live animal, 50 pounds, you know, just for perspective. The other thing is, and like I said, I'm going to be talking about this, is the genetics by environment. And I think that's a huge topic, and it was a big topic at BIF, like a whole day basically dedicated to that. And this is something, you know, I've talked about, my job is to try and give you the most precise tools as possible. And as precise as the EPD is, that's only half the job. Then there's another conversation about what's the range of EPD that works in your environment. And so, okay, so you know, this is a thing that I sometimes talk about with commercial producers. So you made the investment in the genetics and you went and bought that high, you know, weaning weight bull. Did you change your management from the 20, you know, the +20 weaning weight bull to the +60 weaning weight bull to actually translate those genetics into more pounds? Because that's what it's also going to take. Like, the genetics is part of the phenotype, but so is the environment and management. So what else changed? Did we actually realize the genetic potential of that calf? And that's another thing. And Miles is going to contradict me now.
I'm just going to clarify Earl's question here, and maybe I can help answer on that side.
Sure.
There. We have done stats where we've taken, we'll just use weaning weight for example, like, you know, over the last 10 years or 15 years, on average, like every weight reported to us has gone up. But it hasn't gone up on the top siders. Those siders we haven't changed. We've just moved or shifted the entire result standard, like, eliminating the bottom end on that side there. And I think, you know, with what happened in the last year or so, those animals that are eliminated are probably bottom end. So we're going to continue to shift. The top end animals are still, the top end animals are still 50 pounds. It's just the bottom end animal sale today is when the 900 pounds years ago. They were probably 200 pounds. So we've just moved the base of this kind of that. And that's 53 because of the average of all the animals.
Thanks, Miles.
That's another interesting question. You mentioned about the calf's genetic potential. And this year, and you got a lot of calls about this, where suddenly you had huge calves arriving out with relatively moderate birth weight sires and dams.
Yeah.
And is that, in essence, like that's got to be partially genetic, partially
Yeah.
environmental?
Yeah. A lot of people ran out of feed last winter and fed a lot of pellets. And then, you know, we did, well, Nikki will tell you, we did a lot of parentage with commercial producers, getting a little excited, I would say. Hey, I bought this bull, I thought he was a heifer bull, you know, I'm getting really heavy calves. Okay, what was the difference in your management? Because this bull was a, you know, +2 EPD, same as the last 3 bulls you bought. What was the difference in management? If you are going to feed extra, expect that. Cold winters, expect that. And maybe Bart can, you know, maybe elaborate on that. I have a feeling that there's theories in regards to cold winter and putting a lot more energy into in utero development. But there is also environment, and biology is complex. It's not just one thing. You know, it's not my one black and white number in a box that tells you what's going to happen. If that was the case, I'd buy lottery tickets. But, you know, biology is so complex, and it's a conversation. I normally, Jonelle will say, "You're so long on the calls," and it's because it's not like yeah, that's not a heifer bull. Click. You know, it's a conversation about also, well, what's the environment and how did we do this and what are we selecting for? So definitely. Yes.
What are the determining factors you use in determining the 3 categories of bulls?
For these ones, for this project, I just split them in thirds. There was nothing majorly scientific about it. I just split them in third.
Using EPDs?
Yes, yes. Using the GEPDs.
What would be the...
I can go back and look at the range. Yeah. Yeah.
But is it subjective, or I mean, what APDs did you use?
Birth weight, weaning weight, and yearling weight. It was per trait. I made them per trait. I made the groups per trait. I can go over it with you if you want. So these are results of a survey we did in 2019. We sent it to all of our members, but also all of our commercial producers. And I just wanted to share with you what commercial producers make their purchasing decisions based on. You know, a lot of it is the breeder, but a lot of it is also information. And I don't think people realize this. Sometimes members tell me, oh, nobody ever asks me for EPDs. Yeah, but they call me and they say, hey, I want to look at this bull, but he doesn't have EPDs. So just want you to be aware that this is what commercial producers say. That information is important to them. So the blue bar is very important and the orange bar is important. So if you look at that, they're looking at structure, functionality. Structural soundness was the most important thing. And that's why we're working on EPDs for things like feet and teat and udders. Docility. Cow longevity and heifer pregnancy. And I talked to you about the new heifer pregnancy EPD. But we know that cow longevity and fertility are extremely important. So we have a research and development project on male fertility. It's the primary factor in profitability. The number of cows you wean per calf is your bottom line, especially now with feed. If you're feeding a cow all year for no calf, that's really expensive. And if you knew earlier in the breeding season if a bull isn't going to be working for you, that would save you a lot of money too in feed. We know that male fertility, the correlation between male fertility and heifer pregnancy is actually quite low. So if you select for a female fertility, that's great. That's really good. So that's your HPG EPD. But that's not going to help you select for male fertility. So we partnered with American Angus and USDA and Kansas State and Wisconsin State on a male fertility project. So you already semen test, that's an investment you already make. So we're using that data to then see if we can estimate genetic parameters for all those things that vets measure when they're semen testing for you. So it's not, it's not collecting something new or trying to use something that you already collect. So when the vet does a semen test, they're looking for soundness, but then they're also looking for semen quality. And factors that impact semen quality are things like volume, concentration, abnormalities, and motility. When we look at scrotal circumference and weight in our data, they're a straight line, they're correlated. So scrotal circumference also isn't an indicative factor for male fertility. It's a factor with growth. So you need a tool, right? When we look at scrotal circumference and the correlations with volume, concentration, motility, abnormality, all the things I said that the vet looks at for you when he's looking at your semen quality, there's zero correlation. So you need a new tool. You need a tool with which to assess male fertility. If you talk to Nikki through the day, she'll tell you that commercial producers, that's their biggest value, is parent verifying so that they can find out which bulls aren't working. That's where they see the variation. That's what how she sells parentage to commercial producers. We know there's about 33% of failures. And so if you culled a bull that was going to fail semen testing at weaning, we estimate that's a savings of about $800. That was before feed prices this year. So what we want to do is use what you already collect and try and figure out what can we create for you that's a tool so you can select for this trait. So if you have semen test reports, please send them to me. You don't have to format them, you don't have to type them up, nothing like that. Just take a picture, send me a PDF, scan them, send them to me in the mail, send me 10 years. Some people have sent me 10 years worth. Send me this year's, whatever you have in your files. The project, like I said, includes experts from Kansas State, from Wisconsin State University. These are, I want to say theriologists, but I know I'm saying the word wrong. Bart, can you help me? Therianologists, fertility experts. But they're also, the team also includes nutrition. Sorry, Bart? Oh, thank you. The team includes geneticists, the team includes nutritionists, because we know that there's a lot of factors that go into male fertility. Anyway, it's a really good project. So quite a few members have emailed me. If you have yours and you haven't emailed me, David, you said you would. Okay, and then we talked about the heifer pregnancy EPD. But you know what, you collect a lot of information on exposures, and then we have subsequent calving. And so we also have a project on female fertility to see, can we do better with the heifer pregnancy EPD, or can we have a different cow fertility EPD? So we have a project looking at that data. It's data you already submit, we just want to look at it better. We want to look at it more extensively. Is there more value we can make out of it? Are there cows that always calve first? The project is actually ready to go. I'm just looking for a master's student for it. So again, if you know a junior that might be interested in doing their master's with the Canadian Angus Association, you can send them my way. A new EPD that will come out this fall, it'll be a project-based EPD, just to get your feedback and test it out in the real world. It's a cow longevity EPD. So all those times I bug you for a disposal code, or member service girls say, no, not giving you your performance record still, you gotta give me all your disposals first. This is why. So that data goes into assessing cow longevity. And lastly, I'll update you on our high immune response project. So, you know, this is not the first year we've done this. This is the third year we've worked on this project, so some of you may be familiar with it. But for some of you, it might be completely new. So BRD is one of the costliest diseases. We have a lot of loss in the industry because of it, and that's just the model disease that we look at when we look at high immune response. But really, high immune response just means animals that are able to respond to a challenge, whether it's bacterial or viral or fungus, parasitic. In dairy, high immune response animals have 50% less incidence of disease. They also have increased milk production, better colostrum, less mastitis infection, less requirements for antibiotics, and increased fertility. They also have better response to vaccine. So their innate immune response, this is their genetic potential to be responsive, to be fit, to be robust. In pigs, the same test which is developed at the University of Guelph, the pigs had less disease. They had less loss, higher average daily gain. They actually got to market weight 10 days faster because they weren't busy fighting something. They didn't succumb to a disease. Same thing in sheep. So far, I just want to show you the heritability of the traits that we select on, okay? You can see most of them range between, 1.5 to 0.5, right? So far, in our data, our estimates of heritability for HIR is 30. So this is a trait we can make genetic selection for. This is a trait that we can select for and improve within our herds. And you saw the benefits are multiple. There's huge benefits. So we've tested about 4,000 animals in Canada, and now our team is off to the US to test more animals. All of these animals are genotyped, and then what happens is we develop a genetic evaluation. We put out research-based EPDs, test them in the actual industry, validate them, and then we put them into our routine genetic evaluations. This is a huge Angus advantage. It's a huge competitive advantage. Any questions about that project? 30%. That's considerable. That means 30% of the variation that you see between sick and healthy calves is determined by their genetics. That's their genetic potential. So you can really move that. So we had lots of discussion about interesting things like G by E. And so I'd like to end with a plug for another conference. It's one that we're helping to host. So the Beef Improvement Federation is an organization that kind of standardizes collection of phenotypes and all the data that goes into genetic evaluations and then how genetic evaluations are run. It's an excellent conference to go to. There are people here that have been to that conference. Please talk to them if you don't want to take my word for it. But here's an opportunity for you to get to it easily. Normally it's in the United States, it moves around. The last time we had it in Canada was in Calgary, and it was in 2008. So it's about time we host it again, and we're doing that next year. So please plan to come to Calgary for BIF. It will be backing onto Stampede, so hopefully that will also help attract a crowd. So I'll leave you with an invitation to come to BIF next year as well. Any questions, or are you ready for our next presentation? Okay. Yeah, Graham. It's July. You're right. Thank you for fixing that. I'll get on that. Sorry. It's July. It's July, sorry. I apologize. I'm just so excited about it. I'm a month ahead. In Saskatoon. We could tour you around for a whole month, no problem. Okay, give me one moment and we'll get our next speaker up.
I'm the broadcaster. I'm broadcasting to everyone that's watching at home. Yeah. So,
I just would like to see the screen right back here.
I move here, does that give you enough?
I would say in the last couple of weeks,
Okay, folks, I'll get you back into your seats if you don't mind, and we'll get on with the rest of the program. So our next speaker is Cedric Macleod. He got his master's from the University of Manitoba, which is my alum. He's done extensive work with measuring greenhouse gases from agriculture, and now he works with the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association, and he's going to talk to us about forage and grassland management efforts across Canada, okay? Please give him a warm welcome.
Thanks, Kajal. Thanks so much for the invitation. I do have a PhD, but it's in post-hole digging. So I've been, somebody threw that joke at me the other day, and it kind of caught me off guard when you asked me earlier. But yeah, so thanks so much for the invitation. So let me pop this up here. Yeah. A couple things I want to talk to you about today. I got an hour to fill, and so I looked at that. I talked to my staff this week about getting a presentation put together, and they had a nice, tidy little one, you know, for your standard 20 to 30 minute time slot. I said, well, I got an hour, so I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am and where I came from, and it really does it impacts the way that we operate at CFGA. I want to talk to you about some of the policy things that we're doing at the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association to serve the entire grassland sector. But then I want to dig into some detailed projects that are kind of new for us, where we have the opportunity to deploy some dollars directly on your farms and ranches across Canada. So it's a brand new package of opportunity for us that we'll talk about. And the last thing, I really enjoyed Kajal's presentation and the interaction that you had from the crowd. So one thing I will say, if you got questions, raise a hand. Love to have that interaction. And at the end of this, you know, you guys represent a lot of the grasslands across Canada. Your members, the Angus breed, touches a lot of acres of grass. So if there are ideas that you have as I walk through my presentation today where you think there are ways that we could work together within our associations to promote high-performance genetic or high-performance genetics on farms and ranches, coupled with good forage and pasture management, to the idea of greenhouse gas management and carbon neutrality. Those two things come together quite nicely. So if there's things that we can do together to talk to advance that, I'd love to have that conversation. So I left a little bit of time at the end of it, and if we don't fill that spot, then you can give that over to Dr. Lartner, because he's always one of our favorite presenters. So local valley beef. So this is my little ranch. I'm about 2.5 hours just north of here. Trevor Welch, your former president, I guess past president now, he and I farm just about half an hour from one another. So really enjoy working with Trevor on his pasture management systems. I bought my cows in February of 2003, so that started me on quite a journey. I had just come back. I was actually working in Ottawa at the time. I had graduated with my master's from the University of Manitoba. I was working in Ottawa with the Pork Council at the time. So bought a few cows, said, why wouldn't you? So that was where we started, 6 cows. Now, this is April 2004. I bought my little ranch. It was, I had not seen this ranch without a foot of snow on it. And so this is my wife, Jenny Alanda. Yesterday was our 16th wedding anniversary, so I thought it was pertinent to put this up. This is our very first date. So this is the first time that I had stepped foot on this green grass, and I did it with my now wife. So that was April 2004. And I bought the farm, and you know, only had a few cows. We pastured the back, but this is, we did some manual cropping up front, and we started to break it down. And the way we break things down around here is with moldboard plow. Now, fun fact. Anybody catch the news from John Deere yesterday? So, trivia question. What did John Deere, what was his first implement that he built? Steel plow. And he built that out of a saw, right? He was a lumberman. And so he used to saw logs, so he had this tempered steel. So that's where he built the plow. 185 years John Deere has built plows. Their announcement yesterday was they're no longer selling World War plows. So as a conservation tillage guy, that's good for me. As a guy that works in greenhouse gases and soil carbon, that's good for me. They're not going to be selling plows. I'm sure Salford will pick up the difference. But now I started rotational grazing in the summer of 1996. So I went to university down here in Truro, NSAC in 1995. And so we talked about sustainability. We talked about the importance of grasslands on the landscape. We talked about the opportunity to drive pasture productivity through some cross fencing. So I went home and put up some cross fences on our little ranch. Now this is that same field that I showed you. It was corn. And I didn't do very well on my corn. That year we had a really early frost, and I just said, I am done with this thing. The other thing that had happened, obviously, in May with BSC, I couldn't sell my heifers. So I retained all those heifers from this little herd and bred them. And I had 3, and one of them was open, and she was 2 years old, and she was nice and fleshy. And so that's where Local Valley Beef was born. I've been direct marketing my calves ever since 2006. So we transitioned over to full grass systems and really started to deploy that pasture management in a very intensive way. Now at the same time, some of you may recall the grazing mentorship program. The Canadian Cattlemen's Association ran it back in 2006 to 2009. I believe Jim Stone roamed across this country and taught us about intensive rotational grazing systems, and so that's where we deployed it. And you're going to hear a little bit later about how we've actually reinvigorated that program, and that's a new opportunity, I think, for us to partner between CFGA and the Canadian Angus Association to promote good pasture management. Put this up because you can see this is 1 year transition out of that corn system. You can see we still got some wild mustard, which is a challenging weed for us here on the East Coast with annual cropping systems. We had some corn grazing in, so yeah, that was my transition. Really, this is where my system really started to take off. We put a solar water system in so we could water all throughout the winter, and so this first year, we extended our grazing season, right? So now we're moving from just cross fences to extending that grazing season. So to Cowgill's point, when you're feeding throughout the winter, we know what the extra cost is for feeding an animal for a month or 2 months, right? So as long as the further we can extend that grazing system, the more profitable we're going to be on the cow-calf side. So this is part of it, right? And we often miss that nuance when we talk about grazing systems. It's not just about fences and grass. It's about the water. It's about the infrastructure, it's about moving cattle to handling systems, right? So we're designing our systems as a whole. So this is a key point for us. Now, this is a frost-free water bowl. It's got an 8-foot earth tube that goes down, and it, as long as the solar system doesn't act up on me, this thing stays open for me all winter. So moved into some bale grazing. You can see that the farm that I had bought had been continuously grazed for a lot of years, and when I bought it, there was actually a potato crop in those annual crop acres. It had really been used and abused. So my efforts since 2004 have been to rejuvenate this ranch. And so this is a little 4-acre block. You can see red osier dogwood here and some spruce trees starting to come in. This is first generation transfer back to forest. And that's what happens here on the East Coast. If you don't actively farm it, the forest pushes its way back in. So what we did, we used some bale grazing. We do it differently now, but use some bale grazing to start to beat those species back and to introduce some nutrients, obviously through our manure system. Again, extending the grazing season, still trying to keep those costs in check. So we called it a success. We only had a few cows. There's a lot of wastage here. I show this to show progress. The cows are pretty happy. I was pretty happy, and we got some nice response from the grass, right? So working on that systems-based approach. So we continued, we started to pull those trees, did that for a couple years, And I'll show you a picture of that farm, or that field here, just in a moment. 2019, this is our full transition to cows on pasture all season. So that winter water system, we proved it out. We knew we could get through the winter. So the cows have stayed out on this ranch. They didn't come back to the home place. They stay here all winter. And so I show this as progress. This is what my bale grazing system looks like now, right? So we went from this, right, significant amount of waste, to this was minimal, very minimal. I'm very happy with this. A little bit left over, it's going to feed the soil, but the manure is all there. So down here we don't, we do a lot of silage. You've probably heard that from your eastern members, just because of our weather systems, right? So the way I do bale grazing isn't to set them all out. We actually move our feeders 25 feet every week, and we feed silage for once a week. So I can feed 50 cows, 50 cow-calf pairs, if I don't have to move any snow, in 2 hours a week. So to me, that's a nice little modified bale grazing system that keeps my manure in the system. Run a lot of winter annuals. We try and give our forages a break during that hot August period. Let those cool seasons take their rest period, and then they'll bounce back for us in September, October. No-till drill, this was one of the first things I bought when I came back from the West. This is one thing I learned, that no-till does work, it can work, it just takes a different bit of a mindset. And now that we're talking about soil carbon, this becomes very, very important, right? We'll talk a little bit later about breaking grasslands and what that means. So this is the latest addition. He's about 8 now, but I love these pictures. I remember this day where he told me, I a farmer, Dad, right? So this is now what we're working towards. This is what on Local Valley Beef, the next generation. And I know that you folks are working towards the next generation. And the challenge that we have before us is what comes with the next generation. And that's why we're going to talk about some of the policy initiatives we have on the go with the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association. So this is my crew, my mom and dad, and I am first generation. I guess I bought this place. We always had a few cows around with mom and dad, and they've got a few acres. But now we are 3 generations working it out. So this is that field, that one I showed you with the bale grazing and the reclamation. This is last fall, what it looked like. They just went in to this paddock yesterday, and the alfalfa and orchard grass was like this. So really happy with that. Never actually did hit it with the plow. Just used some pretty simple rejuvenation opportunities. This is the girls last fall, sometime, I think that was late October. So yeah, we're feeling really good about how our system's running and extending our grazing season, and how those nutrients are working for us. So some of the adaptations that we've put together, again, these are the things that we're talking about now, right? You guys remember the Shelter Belt Center out at Indian Head, Saskatchewan, right? All those shelter belts we put in the ground, right? All that work we did with the FlexiCoil 5000 to drive no-till into our systems. Remember that? All that carbon work we did. These are the same adaptations we're talking about now as we try. To get that alfalfa in the system, to work with that rotation and get that free nitrogen pulled out, especially in a year like this. We're talking $1,600 urea next spring, right? That's going to be hard to pencil. We've got to be thinking about those legumes and how to get them in. Down here we deal a lot with pH, managing our pH. So those are some of the key things that I'm working on. And we've just built a house. On this picture, it would be right up here. I tricked my wife. She was looking for a place with a view, right? And we just sold our house outside the city, and we're moving. We're going to move back home closer to the farm. And I found this little bluff on the farm, and I took a video, and it just looks out over the valley. And I had never actually recognized it either, because I was always looking down, not up. And I took this panoramic view and showed it to my wife. I said, why don't we build a house here? She never really wanted to live on the farm. And she said, oh, that's awesome. That's the perfect spot. Where is it? I said, it's right in the corner of the land you already own. Perfect. We're moving back to the farm. So that one's going to be done in a couple months. And actually, thanks for the 1 cup note. I actually threw my name in, hopefully looking for some participants from the east. I'd love to have that little early adopter on my place. So that's me. That's my story, and so you can tell I'm pretty passionate about grassland management, and that's why we're doing a lot of things that we are. So thanks for the invite to talk about that. The Canadian Forage and Grassland Association. How many of you know about us? Have heard about us? Some? Yeah. Third? Quarter? Incorporated December 2009. So a fairly young organization, was spearheaded by folks like Doug Ray out west, Ray Robertson in Ontario that had come together. It actually came out of the old expert committees on agriculture, and there was a number of them. I don't know, Bart, were you part of that expert committee in forages? Right, so Ag Canada used to bring leading industry and scientific minds together from across the country to talk about industry-specific pieces, and that whole initiative kind of came apart, and so he said we should have an association to continue to talk about forage-related issues, and this is where we are. We are funded through memberships and project administration, so projects are an important part of what we do, and as we've brought in new projects, we've brought in new members. So, you know, we are a growing organization, which is not without its challenges, but they are exciting ones nonetheless. Certainly driven by that passion for grassland systems, which, you know, passion always is a double-edged sword, but we're working our way through that. So just a little bit in terms of scope, right? And this again goes to the importance of the role that the cow, calf, and feedlot, the cattle sectors, and groups like the Canadian Angus Association play in the Canadian landscape. So just under 34 million acres of tame forage, right? Pasture and feed and forage seed production, right? So that's 39% of total ag production, and it's the next largest crop. Wheat is only 23, so almost double the size of wheat, right? Playing a huge role on the landscape. Further to that, you got those 36 million acres of unimproved or native rangeland, right? And that, I don't know if you've been following this story or not, but those 36 million acres are playing a huge role in the current conversation. Huge carbon stocks down there, huge biodiversity and habitat provision for lots of species at risk. So there's a really important, it's a battle. It's a battle being waged on how do we maintain these 72 million acres. I don't know if you guys caught the report in the Western Producer a week ago. Points to anybody that can give me the number. What percentage are we down in alfalfa over the last 10 years? Alfalfa acres. Let me catch that. 33. We're down from 75,000 growers to 51,000, and we're down 33% in total acres. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for a lot of reasons, because you've got mouths to feed, right? And we've got carbon to sequester, and we got free nitrogen to pull out of the atmosphere. That's 33% down in 10 years. That's a real challenge. So value, don't count that out, $5.09 billion, second after wheat and canola, right? And then you've got that, that's the direct value of the forage industry to Canada. Now, this is circa 2012, so this study is definitely due for an update. But then also that indirect value of about $11 billion to the beef and dairy sectors in Canada. So not only big in terms of acres and coverage on the landscape, but also the value as well. Okay. So that's the forage industry. Now, what are we looking at for priorities at CFGA? We've got 5, knowledge and tech transfer. That's a big piece of what we've done. A lot of our programs have focused on working one-on-one with our provincial associations to advance the idea of high-performance forage, high-performance pasture management. And keeping in mind, those of you farming in those short or those mixed grasses in the southern prairies fully understand that, you know, lush alfalfa orchard grass like this is a lot different what you deal with in those fescue pastures down there, and the management is certainly different. And we understand that, 100%. The provincial, the local, the eco-region nuance for forage management is absolutely critical. And we keep that top of mind in all of our knowledge and tech transfer capability, and we seek to engage the local experts wherever possible, to engage them in our larger community. Applied research and development, so we don't have a research budget to deploy, so we leave that up to the very capable individuals at BCRC, Dairy Farmers of Canada. They've got those cluster dollars. They bring in, you know, those research dollars and they match them with Ag Canada. We see our role is helping to take that scientific, that solid peer-reviewed research, bundle it up through our provincial forage association partners, and get it ready to go out to the grower community. And that's some of the new programs that we have very clearly focused. We've got some resources to make that happen. Policy exploration development, another key one. I'll talk a little bit about the policy directives we have on the go and some projects. That environmental value recognition has been fundamental for us. We've been working on soil carbon for about the last 5 years. And I'll tell you a little bit about an exciting project and product that we've just developed there. And the last one here is forage marketing and export development. Believe it or not, there's hundreds of thousands of tons that leave this country every year in cans and go to places like Japan, Korea, China. US is a big importer of Canadian forage. So that's an opportunity. We just hosted a group from the Middle East a couple weeks ago. We traveled across Canada. Bart's been here for 4 weeks, and I was in Clavet, Saskatchewan, just a couple. And where's Amy? I don't know why she didn't put my local Valley beef on the list for places to visit, Bart. You're just a couple hours away. We'd have loved to host you, but next time we'll catch you. So these folks come in from Aldara, which is one of the largest feed producers and marketers in the world. They're looking for roughly 200,000 tons of export forage out of Canada. They want that grown, packaged, double compressed, put in cans, and delivered to ports. So the world is hungry for forage, and we're growing less. And you guys have got mouths to feed, right? That's to the challenge of how do we maintain or grow. We've got to at least maintain. And how do we grow the acres of forage on this landscape? We've got important things to do with it, and we're going in the wrong direction. So, some programs. I'll just talk about a few of these challenges. Competing land acres. So we're seeing this rapid conversion of perennial acres to annuals, as I've mentioned. Hard to keep up on the profitability index between a canola wheat or a corn soybean rotation and growing hay. Now, that being said, there's a group in Ontario. They're working on high performance Timothy production. These guys are throwing 5 tons dry matter Timothy, 2-cut systems, like full package fungicide, doing a job, right? So you're pulling 4.5 to 5 ton. You're selling that FOB the farm for $3. That's not a bad dollar, right? $1,500 an acre. Close. You got obviously some costs. There's a lot of trips over the field there. And when you're looking at 250 bushel corn sitting at 4 for 1,000, and you only got to travel over the ground 3 times in the season, you can see where the challenge comes, right? But there is some dollar there. Some of it comes down to mindset. But also we need to be looking at, and this is something that we've had conversations with lots of folks, working with John Ross right now at CCA, to look at this forage crop insurance challenge. The crop insurance available to an annual cropper versus what's available to a forage producer, it doesn't compare. Here in New Brunswick, we can't even buy forage insurance. We don't have a product. But I can insure my corn, or what do I got in? I got barley and soybeans this year in rotation. I can insure those lickety splits, but I cannot insure my forages. And we're also the last region that doesn't have a price risk insurance program for our cattle either, and that's why Amy and the Maritime Beef Council are tackling that challenge for us. So risk management in the forage and cattle sector does not compare to the annual crop sector, which means we can't cover our risk as effectively, which means as a business owner, it's not a hard decision. You guys all know the story. Somehow we got to fix that with some policy. And maybe point number 2 here, monetizing these ecological goods and services. You've heard tell of this lots. We've been talking about this for a decade. How do we monetize EG&S? Carbon, biodiversity, water management, right? Now that we've got these international targets for greenhouse gas reductions and carbon sequestration, that's starting to get that ball rolling. You guys have been storing carbon for years in those grasslands, right? So we got a couple challenges. We got to maintain them, and we got to grow them. And then we got to quantify them, and we got to monetize them. That's the extra gravy, ideally, hopefully, that will help you to compete with those annual crop guys. And I'm one of them. I'm not vilifying anybody here that wants to grow wheat and canola. I got some really good friends that do a heck of a job, right? But it's a reality on what do we want our Canadian ag landscapes to look like? What do we need them to look like? So I can show you pictures from 3 Sundays ago. The field above my farm, 40 acres, freshly seeded into barley, underseeded to a nice alfalfa mix. 1.5 inches of rain came in 45 minutes. No word of a lie. 10% of the soil in that field ended up on my farm. And if I hadn't been covered in grass, it would have tore my farm apart. I almost lost my driveway. What do we need our Canadian ag landscapes to look like? And if that includes forages on the landscape, that means we have to have cows on the landscape, because grasslands without cows doesn't work. Might as well all be canola. You guys know this game. So then we're into things like measurement versus modeling, right? This isn't something that we can measure. It's not something we can put over the scale. I'm talking about carbon now. We can't put it over the scale. You can't put it in the truck. You can't put it on the train. You can't measure the number of species at risk that you have. You can't measure the number of birds that pop by your pastures every year. So it's hard to monetize it. Does that mean it's not worth something? Absolutely not. This is why we're tackling these things through policy. The other thing down here is national consistency. That's a challenge for us. And we've seen this, I'll talk about our grasslands inventory project, but a lot of these, carbon, a lot of these EG&S values, they are provincial jurisdiction, and they do things differently by province. So when we do things differently by province, it's hard to roll it up into a national. And if you can't roll it up into a national perspective, you can't talk to Ottawa about it. So this is one of the roles that the CFGA is seeking to play, is to just collect those provinces. We try and build tents, big tents, and pull the doors off. Everybody come in, let's talk about it, let's put these challenges on the table and find some solutions. So here's your solutions. When I first started with CFGA, we said, look, we do not have a carbon quantification protocol for Canadian grasslands. Went to work and built one. Now, the Canada Grassland Protocol is available. You can trade carbon through the Climate Action Reserve. It's on the voluntary market. We currently have a pilot project in play with Shell Canada. Shell Canada's partner with us. They want to buy carbon out of Canadian grasslands. They want it. They want to partner with you to keep those grasslands intact and pay for that carbon. The challenge is some of the policy hoops that we've got to jump through. We try to get it pushed through in Alberta. Of course, that's a gold standard program there in Alberta for carbon trading, known globally. The Canadian offset system was just announced this week. Our pilot projects got an honorable mention. Believe me, there's a lot of people in Ottawa that are looking at our grasslands saying we got to keep them in play. We haven't figured out some really solid ways to do it as of yet. But that's why we're working on these projects. Biodiversity, habitat and biodiversity assessment tool. I guess I kind of skipped over this one, but this is an important piece, and it kind of hit it down here, and I shouldn't have. Agriculture is confirmed as the largest contributor to biodiversity loss globally. Agriculture has been identified as the culprit, as the greatest contributor to biodiversity loss globally. Now, that's a challenge for us, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily play to you guys and gals, because you're maintaining these habitats. You're keeping the grass on the landscape. But when we break that grass and move to annual cropping, then we lose those habitats. Those habitats change. So, globally is obviously, that includes the loss of the Amazon rainforest, right? So it's not necessarily Canada, but agriculture globally. So that's why we've built this little habitat and biodiversity assessment tool that allows you to take a look at your farm. You can plug in your quarter sections that you have, and it'll identify some things that you can do to augment your habitats and create those opportunities for biodiversity. Lots of funding opportunities nationally, ECCC, Ag Canada. Lots of people are looking to fund these kind of activities. So if you're looking for opportunities to bring in revenue, this is an opportunity to do so. Love to talk to you about it. This national grassland inventory, last one down here in terms of policy, again, because we don't have a consistent grassland inventory that we can look at, we can't really build effective grassland conservation policy in this country, which is a real challenge. So we've partnered with conservation groups, partnered with ECCC, Canada's on board. What we're looking to do is use the satellite imagery, right? Just like we're using Vids.ca, right, to identify who's coming to the water bowl and who's not. We got to look at satellite imagery to tell us how many acres of grassland we have on a year-to-year basis. The only challenge is we've got to ground truth it. We've still got to train, right? We've got to train those satellites to recognize what's happening. And in your ranch in southern Alberta with a thin fescue stand versus my stand of alfalfa and orchard grass is a more thick stand, as we call it, thin and thick. The satellite sees them differently. So we've got to train that satellite to see that so we can track this year to year. So that's a project that we've tackled. It's a 3-year project. We just started it. We'll keep you up to date on that one. Now, that's the policy stuff, right? We'll continue to plug away on that on your behalf. This is the stuff where the rubber really hits the road. What we want to do is help you to improve or upgrade or enhance your pasture management systems. So I'd mentioned that grazing mentorship program. Jim Stone came and taught us how to tie high tensile wire and build H-braces, and we never looked back. I actually did that over at John Deinsveld's farm down in Wallace, Nova Scotia. You're going to hear from John tomorrow on some of the work he's doing at the Pan Research Station on research around carbon in our pasture systems down here, and that is funded largely through BCRC. So glad to have John on the agenda. John and I work very closely together. We run very similar ranches, very similar mindsets. So we said we need to get this mentorship program back up and going. We all know that we've lost those extension services provincially and nationally around forage and pasture management. Christine O'Reilly in Ontario, one person replaces where there used to be 5 in Ontario. She's covering all forage, pasture and forage management. It's an unbelievable task. We don't have the people. So we said, hey, with all the focus on grazing, let's get this mentorship program back together. So Steve Kenyon is who we partner with. You guys probably all have heard Steve Kenyon. Used to write in Country Guide or Canadian Cattleman's magazine from out of Westlock, Alberta. Steve has helped us to design this grazing program that we're using common principles across the country. And again, regardless of where you are, if you get 18 inches of rain a year or a meter and a half, the grazing principles are the same. Graze period, rest period, animal impact, stocking rate, soil armor, grass. They're all the same. How we deploy them are different. So we've sought to pull this grazing mentorship program together with a fundamental focus on grazing management principles, and as we move across the country, we bring in that provincial nuance, right? Because your ranches in the south of the prairies aren't going to operate the same way that Nick and I's do here on the East Coast, but the principles that we deploy are the same. The way we do it are differently. So we have linked up with our provincial forage councils here in the east, where we're working with the New Brunswick Soil and Crop Improvement Association to make sure that we're getting those nuances built in wherever possible. We're focusing on the next generation of agronomists, and as much as possible, we're going to start to move our way in through the universities and colleges and introduce these concepts of grazing mentorship. And keeping in mind that mentorship isn't just about the fundamentals of grazing, it's about how do we interact. And the theory of innovation is something that's become core to this. Because we've talked about points for anybody that knows the first time rotational grazing principles were documented. Anybody? Bart? No? 1777, Scotland. James Anderson documented how his rock walls that he put on his farm in Scotland provided rest to those grasses. So we've been talking about this concept for 300 some years, but it hasn't become fundamentally ingrained in what we do. Now, that being said, if you look at the Census of Agriculture, it'll tell us that 54% of growers in Canada are rotational graziers. But does a single cross fence, does it move every month? Does it move twice a summer? Does that constitute rotational grazing? It's a rotation, but it's not necessarily a full systems-based rotational grazing mindset. So that's why we're speaking to mentorship on how we build relationship, how we transfer information, and really trying to understand the barriers to adoption. Because we've been talking about it for a long time, but we haven't quite gotten there. So far, we've trained about 85 folks. We've got some more trainings coming June and October. We are planning some in-person sessions. We've got our first one booked August 3rd. Steve's coming down. We're going to do our Maritime Forage Field Day with Maritime Beef Council and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. We're going to do a cell grazing design there. Going to jump into Quebec. I know that there's talk with Erica in Alberta about engaging Steve to do some one-on-one trainings for this mentorship. And I'm wondering here, Casual, this is the opportunity, right? We're talking about grazing systems. We're talking about training. Is there an opportunity for us to partner with the Canadian Angus Association? Do you guys want to host some sessions? Can we bring Steve out and talk about, advanced grazing management systems? What does that look like for you guys? I know we've seen a lot of interest in this from Western Canada, and my heart goes out to you. Say I was in Clavette 2 weeks ago. We traveled down through Lethbridge. We were up and through Olds. Dry conditions. My heart always goes out to the folks in Western Canada when you're in these situations. 2 years of drought now coming on. We're getting a lot of calls from people saying my pastures are just not there. We hit them hard last year to try and get through the season. They're not coming back. We need to do something different, right? Is this an opportunity for us to work together? I hope so. The other thing we're building is this learning management system. And The LMS is something that universities would use to house a lot of detailed information. It becomes a resource that you can come and jump into with short videos. Kind of an extension product. So this is something that we're pretty excited about as well. Dr. Dan Undersander at the University of Wisconsin, probably recognized well in the North American forage industry, is one of the leading minds in forage and alfalfa management. Been talking to Dan for a lot of years about putting together a high-performance forage management training program. And Dan is long on the tooth, but he's got a huge resource of information. And there's a lot of those resources around the country, and they're sitting underneath some white hair that we haven't harvested yet. And because we've lost our extension services, we haven't created that succession to the next generation of agronomists. So a lot of that information, if we don't capture it in videos, right, somehow we're going to lose it. So this is what this project is all about. And so we're working with Forage Genetics International, who is a member of the CFGA, partner with us. They would be one of the largest seed breeders. We're going to pull this thing together. We've got about 11 modules we're going to put together. So that'll be a training package. Two pieces to it. Now we recognize that as you're bumping along on the tractor and you get your earbuds in, you may have a question about fertility or seeding or harvest, whatever it might be. We're looking to put this together in a series of like 10-minute clips. So if you want to talk about how to identify the optimal alfalfa harvest time, click on that link, comes into your earbud. Now for the budding young agronomists in the room that want some more detailed training, we're going to have some of those larger. Good things. The last one, that rotational grazing, we know that when we have more above ground biomass, we have more below ground biomass. And that below ground biomass is that carbon storage that the global community is looking for. And they're asking you to do more. And we're saying, all right, here's some dollars, let's go get it done. So we got up to $15,000 per farm. And our particular project is operating in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Quebec. But this program is being delivered in every province in Canada by different partners, right? So $15,000 to help you fund some cross fences or water systems that help you to deploy a rotational grazing system that will help you get more carbon driven underground, right? Start to stack that up with maybe some interseeding of alfalfa or white clover to augment your nitrogen, carbon and nitrogen ratios, drag some free nitrogen in, push productivity, increase your pasture sward quality, decrease your enteric fermentation emissions. There's all kinds of good things that start to stack up with this. So what's the first step is to do a bit of a grazing plan, right? Design your cells, do your layout, tell us how many miles of fence you want to put up, fill out the application, we'll get you ready to go. Yes.
I have a question. So it's a $15,000 one time per operation?
Great question. It's $15,000. Now, if you want to come back year over year, we can look at that. And we've also got provision, and $15,000 is based on about an average herd of maybe 100 in Canada. We've got a provision in there. We know there are some large ranches You betcha. So if you come in here to this and you give me, don't do that, do that. You give me a good grazing plan that says I need $55,000 to get this thing done and I'm going to get it done in 2 years, I'll give you a check mark.
Not to blow a hole in this, but when you talk about your grazing management and grazing plans, you consider, not to blow a hole in it, but when you consider your grazing management plans and in terms of some large acres, you're looking at a well that's going to cost you, upwards of 15 to hundreds of thousands. Then you want to run the water pipelines out to your pastures. Right now in my operation, 15,000 won't cover one solar water system. We're not talking about your cross fencing, your water lines. If you want, we've distributed out to different pastures to get away from riparian areas, and just the whole grazing plan of protecting those wetlands. So we're working hand in hand with Ducks Unlimited. We've listed a number of acres with DU and in doing some what you're talking about. But like I said, I don't mean to deflate the balloon, but 15,000 at some bigger operations in Western Canada where I come from are just, it's not a lot of money, especially in today's economy when we've talking, the inflation rates and some of the projects that you could look at in your different your grass management. We have a large number of acres that are just straight native prairie. They never will be broke. They're under conservation easements that we've put them there for this. So saying that, we've already done a conservation easement, would this still be eligible for your carbon capture, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely, and great comments across the board. And that's why we try to build this program to be flexible, to recognize if somebody comes in and says, I got 12,000 acres here. I want to get this job done, and here's my bill. Put it in front of us, and we'll see what we can do. I think the other part of this is, we're going to eat this elephant a bite at a time, right? So if we do a block, then a block, then a block, I expect this program, this is the kind of programming you're likely to see from the federal government moving forward as we try and meet some of these targets. So that would be the first thing to say. We are flexible. We're ready to work with you. The second piece, and thanks for bringing it up, working with groups like Alice, Ducks Unlimited Canada, any of the conservation agencies that do have pockets of funding. You look at, this is Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada funding, but ECCC, Environment Climate Change Canada, they've got funding packages too. I think the point I'm making here is there's opportunities to bring things together and put together significant funding packages to support you guys in doing the good things that you're doing. Where it really starts, and this is maybe where it sets our program out just a little bit, is that we are really focusing on that grazing plan. We really want you to go back and work with your agronomist, work with your grazing mentor, work with the Steve Kenyon, to build out that strategy of what that's going to look like. And then we can come in and figure out ways to fund it. That's where we're starting. The other, and I guess the last thing I'll say on the grazing plan is it goes to mindset, right? It's not just about fences. It's not just about water. It's about understanding that landscape, how your cattle are going to move across that landscape, the impact they're going to have, and we want to make sure that all those impacts are positive, because I said it before, and I'll say it again, grasslands are no good without cattle. So we need the good work that you guys are doing to continue, and we're going to continue to try and augment that.
Cedric, we have one more question.
Yeah, and I should probably be done anyway. Go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. I think it's really interesting to see, and I've been involved in dealing with grass, whatever. I participated in one of the discussions of the Grassland Council as well. I was a little bit disappointed until the last sentence you mentioned, that without livestock, forget the grasslands and the forage management. And one of the issues in Eastern Canada that I didn't see you address, one of the things that we're facing is the word abandonment of animal agriculture. It's one of the greatest challenges we have in Eastern Canada. It's not how to develop more forage and everything, it's to encourage people to have livestock and principally cattle as a means of putting value in that land, and you don't need to have alfalfa. That's my dirty word, is alfalfa. Because I think that there are a lot of other plants that the ruminant biodigester, mobile one, can utilize very efficiently and add value to our lifestyle, to our climate, respect our ancestors who cleared the land, because in Eastern Canada, if you don't have some livestock and you don't have a reason, we know what it becomes. And just north of here, I drove from north of Ottawa down here by way of, came probably by your way, and that's the biggest thing I see is abandonment. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of small fields surrounded by forests that have become no fields, totally in forest. I think that we've got to somehow challenge everyone to see that grass can be as effective or more effective in carbon sequestration than trees, because eventually trees fall down and they create their own. Anyway, thank you for that, and I just want to encourage you to remain, retain that word. We got to have the livestock, otherwise it's all lost.
No, thanks for those comments. I couldn't agree more. Just a few quick responses. New Brunswick, we're sitting on, they estimate there's probably 1 million acres that have grown back up in trees here. And the challenge with those 1 million acres that have grown back up, it's not good trees, right? It's the old pasture spruce. It's garbage, right? No, lumber mills don't want it, and the pulp mills don't want it, and so now we got these monster trees. We got to drag them down and burn them so we can get to the soils underneath. Because little beknownst to me, after you pasture an acre, the Acadian forest down here, those hardwood species that we would like to see in the landscape, they won't grow in it. So you got to go in and rip it, so you get those deep channels, so those hardwoods can take a hold. So is that the best use of those 1 million acres? Absolutely not. Do we got to grow food? Absolutely. Let's get this job done. But it comes down to some of the policy pieces. And so I ran the New Brunswick cattle producers up until recently, so I don't know, 10 years or so. I was a chair before that. We asked growers, what's it going to take for you to put more livestock in your herd to expand? And they said, see the color of my hair? We need the next generation to come along and do it. Now, one thing we've identified is risk management. I mentioned that earlier. Forage price insurance, don't have it. Can get it for corn and soybeans. If you're north of Ottawa, you know that game well. Right, you guys can, right. We can't. We don't have price insurance, right? We don't have those vehicles, so we can't cover our risk on growing cattle, right? So these are some pretty important fundamental policy conversations we need to have if, as cattle operators and grassland operators, we had the same level of risk management that our annual crop brothers and sisters have. Would we see a difference? Maybe. There are some days when I say, you know what, I should just be growing corn and soybeans, usually when the cows decide they found out that the fencer was off and they're over in the neighbor's garden. It happens, right? But we're also creating different value that we need to recognize, and that's something fundamentally that we're working on your behalf at the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association, and I am at time. I want to thank you guys again for the opportunity to be here. Oh, go ahead.
Quick question.
Yes.
One of your slides, you 40% alfalfa.
I did which?
40% alfalfa.
There's people online watching, and we want them to be able to hear you.
On one of your slides, you showed 40% alfalfa. So what special considerations you take to combat bloat?
Yeah. So I think that was on one of my early slides, right, for my farm strategy. The way we've looked at bloat, personally, is I'm willing to take the risk. And back me up here, you guys are geneticists in the room, that there is a genetic predisposition to bloat. So if we push alfalfa levels, I might put myself right under the bus here. If we push alfalfa levels and we lose some, and we understand where those calves came from, which cow it was, and that cow needs to be culled. That's my personal thought, and that's my strategy. Now, well, but in terms of the percentage loss that we typically get, and I think this is in a lot of the extension materials, they'd say the same thing. The added value you get, and Bart, back me up here, the added value you get of having a high legume content in terms of animal performance outweighs the death loss that you might get from having a high legume content in the stand.
I get your comment with the 40% alfalfa deal. You know, the worst thing in the world is to go out there and see a bloat storm. Anyway, my point is that there's other options. In my mind, it's legumes, be it alfalfa or be it sisal milk vetch or bird's foot trefoil or sandfoin. The whole deal is get an end-fixing plant in your rotations, right? So if you're not comfortable with grazing alfalfa, absolutely. And there's binary mixtures, there's different mixtures you can put in there to reduce the incidence of bloat, i.e. sandfoin at 20%. So absolutely, I mean, it's a great point is that the cost of fertilizer in 2023 is going to drive us to look at incorporating legumes into our rotational management. So, you know, everybody has a comfort zone. You know, you do, the cattle do, so just do your research, figure out what's going to be beneficial in my pasture stand, in my mixture, that's going to be persisting and it's going to fix some end for me. So,
thanks for that backstop, Art. And you know, I come back to I remember conversations we had with Vern Barron about some of this too on the management side. You know, we often look to research, we look at genetic improvement, we look at forage breeding to try and deal with our issues. I think we're in a lot of cases looking past management. Right? There are management pieces that we can deploy now that will help us to drive our productivity without always looking over the fence saying, what do we need for research? What do we need for new breeding? Right? So we've got to have a mix of both, certainly, but I think that's where we're looking at it. It's a management mindset focus, and 100%, that's where I'm at. I'm comfortable with that. I've never lost an animal to bloat. We try and manage when we move them. We don't move them when it's wet. We always keep some dry hay available, right? So if they're feeling that rumen kind of moderates itself. But I also don't have to buy any nitrogen fertilizer. And that's the trade-off for me. So, any other quick questions? Sure. Yeah, it was the UN, right? Yeah. So yeah, a couple months ago, the UN identified Canada as one of the most carbon-intensive agricultural industries in the world. It's hard to refute that. We use a lot of nitrogen, and that's really where the driver has come, right? So we have lost grasslands, so our carbon sequestration numbers are down, and we've significantly increased our use of nitrogen fertilizers. So, I mean, it's tremendous what they're doing with canola, right? You get down that black dirt out west, pushing 70, 80 bushel canola, well, you need 2 pounds a bushel, so you're pushing 140 pounds of nitrogen. I mean, that's up until, what, 10, 15 years ago? That was unprecedented probably in Western Canada. Now they're doing it. We're pushing 250 bushels of corn. A decade ago, we were looking at 185 in Ontario, right? So we've seen this significant increase in productivity, but we've also seen an increase in the use of nitrogen fertilizers to get that job done. And the math is very simple on that. What do we do about that? The off-calf program is designed to help with pinpoint accuracy on nitrogen management, trying to pull back your rates, top dressing nitrogen where possible, not putting on insurance rates as nitrogen. Climate smart agriculture and driving towards that is the name of the game, while still trying to feed the world. So it is an unfortunate reality, but I think that's where we are.
Just a bit of an argument to that. So on one side of the fence, do you understand that we are that high that there's things to make? So on the other side of the fence, on the other side of the on the other side of the fence, why are we not being commended for the amount of technology that the agricultural industry is? You take the dairy industry where they've increased their milk production through genetics, the same with their cattle, our crops. We farm a sizable amount of land. The precision agriculture that's been invested, I have a son-in-law that's an agronomist, my son also. These guys want things that are not on the shelf yet. They don't want to wait till they're out. They want them before they're out. For the leading edge of technology, it's no different with what Ecological is doing. So why aren't we getting the recognition back? And I'll go back to your slide there. 15,000 is a pittance to what a $1 million air seeder is worth today.
Yeah.
You know, and there's operations that run multiples of those in the size but the food production that we are going to be asked to produce for a growing world population. Why are we not being? Don't get me wrong. Our commodity prices for grain and such things are the highest we've ever seen them. But take back on the other side of your inputs. And when I hear about the nitrogen applications being the precision agriculture that we are utilizing in today's industry is phenomenal from what my grandfather used a horse and a drill.
Yeah.
So that's where I have a little bit of problem of hearing that argument that we're using so much nitrogen.
Well, no, and fair enough. You're bang on, and we've been banging that drum for years, right? We've got to have recognition for the good things because we always hear about the bad things. We always hear about the other side of the equation, and the challenge with that is the science hasn't necessarily kept up. So when it comes to, you look at the new Living Labs initiative that Ag Canada has pushed out, very clearly focused on understanding greenhouse gas emissions and carbon sequestration. So all of those advanced BMPs, beneficial management practices that we're deploying, we are seeking to understand what that credit is, what that value is, right? And that's why we're seeing, a $500 million investment from the federal government towards climate smart ag to continue driving forward with those BMPs. So you're right, it's hard. I'm a grower too, guys. I get it. We're getting hit on both sides, and it feels like we're not getting enough support. And to date, we haven't, but I think this is the start of it. So I think our opportunity now is to use this $500 million that's on the table. Let's get it deployed. The last thing we want to do is have this money sit on the table, and then Ag Canada come back and say, well, we tried, you didn't get up and get the job done. Let's go get those fences in, let's get the water systems in, let's get our precision ag covered. Let's get our cover crops in. Let's show the world that we can get this done and say, where's the next check coming, please? Because we will do this job if you continue to pay us to do it, because to date you haven't. It's a good comment. Thank you for that.
I'll try not to scream into this. Like you were saying over there, how like $15,000 doesn't seem like a lot and can be a challenge. I know I just started working with the Ministry of Ag in Saskatchewan this summer, and I encourage people to also reach out to their provincial governments too, because there's up to $50,000 in funding for the farm and ranch water infrastructure programs, whether that's dugouts, wells, and same thing for native grassland reclamation. If you have seeded like an annual crop within the last 2 years, you can get up to, I believe, $10,000 or $20,000 in funding for reseeding those annual crops to native grassland, especially in Saskatchewan. We face a lot of like not great soil quality in certain areas. So I think that if there's an opportunity to work with you or your government or Farm Credit Canada, I know that it's like often a long, difficult process to apply for those, but there definitely are programs out there, and like they said, you have to take one bite at a time. But yeah, I encourage people to look at provincial governments as well, because there is funding available.
That's amazing. Thanks for those comments. And that's, you know, working with our provincial forage councils, that's the exact kind of thing that we've encouraged them to do, right? Take a look at all those opportunities, bundle them together, and put them together with your plan. Because like you say, you start to stack up a couple $20,000, $50,000, $30,000 checks. It means something. So thank you for that. I'm out of here. Thanks so much.
All right. Okay, we're going to break for coffee, and please, if you would mind, during coffee, not just visit with people because it's so nice to see everybody, but also have a look at the silent auction items that are now in the foyer. So we'll break until 11.
I'll wait to see your golden smile, feel of 1,000 kisses. Oh, please stay a while. I'll reach up to hold your sunlit face. Feels like a handful of silk now. I'm in your warm embrace. Oh, I hope this feeling lasts till the oceans turn to glass and the world around us turns and fades to black. Together we'll hold back the sun in this moment, forever young. Against the stream of time we'll run, baby. We'll hold back the sun. This feeling moves me every single day. I'm captured by your charm, enchanted by your ways. In the magic of your eyes, I've become lost in their spell. So come closer, my dear, because all is well. Oh, I hope this feeling lasts till the oceans turn to glass and the world around us turns and fades to black. Together we'll hold back the sun in this moment, forever young. Against the stream of time we'll run, baby. We'll hold back the sun. When the sun goes down and the world spins round, when I lay right next to you, I can't close my eyes even though I try. These perfect moments are few. I fall asleep in embrace in the morning, awake to that perfect side of you. Together we'll hold back the sun in this moment, forever young. Against the stream of time we'll run, baby. We'll hold back the sun in this moment, forever young. Against the stream of time we'll run, baby. We'll hold back the sun in this moment, forever.
Running down Thompson Ridge in old blue jeans. A triple backflip off a rusted tire swing. Broken arm and trophy scars. Oh, that's one hell of a way to win a heart. It might kill him before we're done. At least it keeps us young. Young like summer nights, dancing around in circles, bathing in the moonlight. Young when you fall so fast, busy being 17 and hoping this love lasts. It might
hiked up to a mountain, followed a bird up there, 'cause I found me a woman who treated me unfair. And I woke to the sunrise, remembered an awful dream of lightning and thunder, and hearing someone scream. Trouble finds you and worry, it sticks around until you're dead. Once you found a little darling, and she takes over your head. And I see when it was blowing, I had to find me a hole for to climb in and live forevermore. And I heard voices calling in my delirious state, saying something out in Spanish. That's when I went insane. Trouble finds you and worry, it sticks around until you're dead. Once you found a little darling, and she takes over your head. I came back down from that mountain, I had to get me a job, working behind the counter, selling gas and soda pop. One afternoon I was bothered, because those nights never end. Now they just sent me back up onto that mountain again. Trouble finds you and worry, it sticks around till you're dead. Once you found a little darling, and she takes over your head. Trouble binds you and worry, it sticks around until you're dead. Once you found a little darling, and she takes over your head.
It was the first time you felt just a little bit of something, baby, and I felt believing I'd fly. I found a reason to give you just enough of what you wanted, baby, to find you were willing to try. Made your heart it wanders, looking for a reason to find yourself for something that you could try. If I placed what I have
Hi, folks. Can we get back to our seats for the next presenter? I'm sorry, I feel bad cutting everybody off from visiting. I know it's really nice to see everybody after such a long time.
It was the first time you felt just a little bit of something, baby. And I felt believing would fly. Yeah, I found a reason.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Dr. Lartner, who's from the University of Saskatchewan, where he specializes in pasture and water management and ruminant nutrition. Dr. Lartner is going to be talking to us about supplementing fat and beef cattle diets, and also about a very cool project that we're working on with him at Canadian Angus. So please help me welcome Dr. Lartner.
All right. Well, thank you, Kajal and Amy, for letting the cat out of the bag that I was out here wandering around the Maritimes on sabbatical. While you're out here, Bart, get the hell off the golf course and come do a talk. So here I am today in Moncton. Instead of flying out of Charlottetown to Newfoundland, I'm flying out of Moncton to Newfoundland. So, yeah, no, it's always nice to have a conversation with a group of people. Thank God, after 2 years of video and Zoom and Teams and Lord knows what else. A little bit about myself. Born and raised in British Columbia. We had a dairy farm in the Okanagan when I was about 5, 6 years old. And then we moved to the Kootenays, and Dad was a producer from Manitoba in the dirty 30s. My grandfather farmed. And he always wanted to farm. And we just never had enough land in the Kootenays. Actually lost the dairy farm in the Okanagan because the bank went and took it, double-digit inflation. And then we saw cheap land up in northern BC. And so in '71, we moved up there to the Peace River country of British Columbia. And it was that move that probably reflects why I stand here today as an old guy in the livestock research end of things. Because we had hay and beef ranch up there, did some cropping, but that's really where I fell in love with the livestock industry. And I left there, couldn't work with Dad. That sounds familiar, maybe. Wouldn't listen to him as a teenager. Went out, worked farms, ranches, feedlots, vet clinics, all through Western Canada. And packed grade 12 around for quite a while, or grade 11, I guess it was. And I got the bug to learn. So I went back and did my sciences and maths in community college, and back in, I think it was 1980, as a mature student. Everybody else was 18, 19, I was 28. Anyway, and from there I went and did a 2-year diploma course in Fairview College, which is now defunct. That just shows my age. And I finished that 2-year program, and it wasn't enough of learning. It was like it sets a seed. And I walked into one of my instructor's offices, and there on the shelf was the calendar for the University of Saskatchewan. And I said, "What is this? What is university?" You know, I grew up, my dad had grade 7, my mom had grade 5. And so, you know, it was just get through high school, Bart. That's all Mom wanted, right? So, and then, lo and behold, 1984, I wandered out to University of Saskatchewan, started there, and Gord Davies sits here today, helped me in my graduate work many moons ago, Gord. And now I'm faculty at the Department of Animal Science. So you know what? Never give up if you have a goal or an objective, because you know, you'll reach it at some point. And I really look at myself not, you know, as a well-published faculty. I look at myself as an intermediary, sitting on the fence between the industry and the research world. And that's my goal is to disseminate information back to you folks, the stakeholders, the producers. And like I was telling somebody, I think like a producer first and a scientist second. And so So with that, and then I hear the conversations about forages and all those fun things, and that's really my passion, because when I came out of grad school in '98, forages were kind of a swear word. It was crazy, and it's funny how now here we are in 2020, and it's front and center, right? We're talking about the great things you do on your farms and ranches, and the rotational grazing, the carbon sequestration, and all those fun things, and corporate Canada is looking to work with you to buy some of those things. It's crazy. Change is inevitable. It's just, are we ready for it, right? Are we ready for it? So when I was thinking about what I was going to chat with you folks about today, I wish I would have picked a forage topic. Anyway, I didn't. So I'm going to be the bad today and talk about utilizing co-products from the cropping industry. But you know what? A lot of that, I heard Cedric was talking about bale grazing. We did that research back in 2002, some of that early work. And you know, it's all about nutrient cycling. It's all about putting that critter on that acre of land for as many days as possible, because she is the greatest recycler ever, he or she, right? So, and I'm doing lots of extension talks, and I just see that need to draw in the cropping producer beside you wherever you live, and get that partnership built. So just a little bit about what I do in my job. And I do three things. I teach undergraduate and graduate students, MSc and PhD folks. I've been around long enough, and the gray hair and old enough, that my grad students are evaluating my research proposals now. So that just shows you, and then Kaja was saying Tess is going to start with you folks. So Tess is currently a master's student of mine, and we have a lot of them in the BCRC office. We have a lot of them in Sask Ag and Food as extension folks, and you know, the grad students are my biggest pride, because they're the next ag advocates and folks that are going to support you on the farm and the ranch. The other thing I do is research, and we run a pretty vigorous research program at University of Saskatchewan, hence now the Livestock Forage Center of Excellence. And so right now, as you speak, this morning we have about 8 projects happening. I'm out here on sabbatical, so I'm on text and email constantly with my lab group. But the third thing I do is what I'm doing here today, and that's tech transfer, outreach, extension. And I really do, that's probably the one part of my job I enjoy the most, is just chatting with folks and talking to producers. I've talked to a few of you here today. You know, the challenges of being a beef producer in 2022 is it's a challenge. And so hopefully the work that we do, that I do, you can look at it and you can you know, pick the eyes out of it and maybe adopt some of it. I don't know, on your farm or your ranch. But I'm going to talk about fats up, among other things. And I also found out, and I don't know, maybe some of you have read some of the stuff I put in Popular Farm Press. Don't know. I figured out this deal, this Twitter deal, about, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. And I just use it as a vehicle, because I need to reach those girls right over there. That's the next generation. And I can email my kids, they won't answer. That sound familiar? I can text them and maybe they'll answer. But if you Snapchat the buggers, yes, Bart's on Snapchat. Anyway, so yeah, you could choose to follow me. And I use that as a vehicle to get our research results out to you. And it's amazing, the conversations on there. You know, yeah, maybe Elon Musk is going to buy it, or I don't care who owns it, but it's a vehicle. And how many people use hard copy to learn new things, right? So social media is there. I'm not a big Facebooker, but I use it just to get our research findings out and to hopefully have that conversation. A little bit about what we do at U of S. And And my whole program is applied cow-calf and forage research. And so for the last 25 plus years now, I've been looking at ways and means of feeding that mama cow, getting her bred, getting the calf on the ground, and taking it to that background weight. And so forages are a big, big part of that program. And it's all about applied, so we're trying to do work that's going to be applicable to you, the producer. And I think I was just chatting with someone about Cedric's conversation and bale grazing. And I seen that work we did, and then I seen the Alberta guys picking it up, and the Manitoba producers. Nervous Brothers, you Twitter people, have taken that bale grazing program and have refined it, unbelievable. And now I see it out here in the Maritimes. You know, it's all about nutrient cycling. It's all about, yeah, it's a different thought. You don't start the tractor, you start the cow. She has 4 legs. She can walk to the feed. And cows have teeth too, by the way. So, you know, do we need that? Do we need that iron in the yard? So I started back in 1998 at Lanigan, Saskatchewan, just east of Saskatoon, at a 12 quarters of land, 1,960 acres, donated by the Tremundy family to the university. And as soon as I drove out in that yard, I knew exactly this is the ticket. Like, I worked with Dad up in Dawson and up in there, and went home. But I really had a passion for trying to do new things, new research projects. And so that was my lab, not bricks and mortar. It was dirt and critters. And of course, things change, and governments talk to industry, they talk to universities. And so in 2018, the new Livestock Forage Center of Excellence was relocated from Lanigan, Saskatchewan, which is an hour and a half east of Saskatoon, to Clavet, Saskatchewan, which is only 20 minutes off campus. So we're in that process of changing, you know, our facilities, our resources. It's an unbelievable opportunity for an old guy like me to get new scientists going, and to build capacity in forage, grazing, feedlot, metabolism barn, vet colleges there, engineering, economists. So if some people who've read my stuff, we always put a price on it. We always put a dollar value. So Kathy Larson, I will mention her right off the hop. She is the best production economist in Canada, hands down, and has helped me in my program. All right, so I'm going to talk the front end of my slide presentation. I don't know if I'm going to need the full hour, but I'm going to talk about just looking at supplementation in a pregnant beef cow's diet, and some of the opportunities of using the co-products of some of the cash crops that we grow in Western Canada. And then I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to just chat a little bit about some other activities that we're looking at doing because of the pushback the beef industry has been getting about enteric emissions, specifically methane, okay? Who knew I'd be doing, you know, enteric emission research starting back in 1998? I was all about, you know, legumes and grasses and all about winter feeding. And now we're trying to measure, you know, the number of grams per day of CH4 coming out the front end of that critter. Because we need to give you the ammunition, the information, to push back against Ottawa and all those other things that are coming at you, i.e. carbon tax, okay? So, but you know, I always say, whether you're feeding that cow whatever year, don't forget she needs nutrients: energy, protein, vitamins, minerals, and water, okay? And I don't care where you get them from, but make sure they're going to meet the requirements of her. Whether she's pregnant, whether she's lactating, whether that's that replacement heifer, that breeding bull, or that grasser, right, that stocker animal, they're going to need a certain level of energy, protein, vitamins, minerals, and water. Okay? And that's the biggest challenge. The seasonality challenge out for us in Western Canada is cold stress. Okay, winter, cold stress. So we deal with that nonsense from November till May some years, right? And it's a dry, cold year, and we can do things out there that you probably can't do in the Maritimes when we extensive graze our critters. And I say that because I know it's a Achilles heel, but I tell my grad students, you're never going to run out of a job because the boys are still not feed testing. We got to hammer that home, right? So how do you know the nutrient density of what those animals are getting unless you get an estimate of energy, protein, vitamins, mineral, right? Otherwise, you're just ad hoc. Case point, in 2010, we had 4 times the rainfall in Saskatchewan. And we got the same volume of hay, but it was washy feed. We fed the same weight per basis. Come spring, we had cows that were thin. Thin cows don't rebreed. End of story, right? So feed test, feed test, feed test. And we heard that earlier, is that, you know, the nutrients are going to go 2 ways: to maintenance, just to keep her alive, right? Her circulatory system, her respiratory system, her pregnancy, and the rest is going to go to product. So growth, tissue accretion, those kinds of things. And you know, you have to be aware of that. And whether it's heat stress or whether it's cold stress, she's going to need more. And so what is that? 10%, 20%? Because in my goal for our cows out there in Saskatchewan, coming into that winter feeding program, is to maintain body weight. Maintain body condition, body condition. Okay? That fat reserves on a rib and a rump. So if she comes out into calving, she's going to calve, she's going to recycle ASAP. Right? We want her to get through that PPI as soon as possible and start to cycle, to catch again. And give us a calf every 365 to reduce that postpartum interval. Okay? So that's just why it's important to know what she's going to need for maintenance, what she's going to need for cold or heat stress. Oh, my slides are all weird here. So the title says, why fat in ruminant diets? Well, because we want to increase the energy density. We want to improve the palatability. Maybe it's not very palatable feed. We want to maybe increase propionate production. Who knows what propionate is? It's a volatile fatty acid. It's a byproduct, right, of the ruminant digestive system. There's 3 of them that we worry about, and I'll speak to those here in a minute. The propionate short-chain fatty acid is the good one. It eats up some of those hydrogen ions, so that's a good one. And that's why we look at the ratio of acetate to propionate, because we want to know acetate is going to produce hydrogen ions, propionate is going to use up hydrogen ions. And hydrogen ions are floating around the rumen, just ready to be made into methane. Okay, so. And it also has suggested through a lot of research that inclusion of fat, not greater than 7 or 8% total diet, may have an increased additive effect for repro efficiency. Right? So shorten up PPI, maybe get those cows cycling quicker, sooner, more often, fertility, all those things. A little fat in the diet's, you know, too much is a bad thing, just the right amount's a good thing. Where does that fat come from too, right? You have to think about that. Well, there you go. So I'm looking at this, and, well, we can't feed tallow anymore, but we do grow a heck of a lot of canola in our province. Everybody drive through Saskatchewan in June and July, it's yellow. And flax, right? So blue flowered crop, cash crop. And then, lo and behold, we're learning from the Manitoba dudes who've been growing corn and soybeans for years, and now we're growing corn and soybeans in Saskatchewan. In fact, a lot of my research has looked at grazing whole plant, standing corn, to extend the grazing season as an option to bale grazing. But, so okay, we looked at that. Okay, there's a lot of canola, thousands of acres. What about the co-products that come from canola and or flax? Okay, these polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fatty acids as an energy source to put in a pregnant cow's diet. So that's why I'm going to chat a little bit about flax, because some of these slides I was pitching to the Saskatchewan Flax Council, and I've been very lucky in my career to be supported by industry, you know, a lot of funding, by Saskatchewan Cattlemen's, Alberta Beef Producers, Manitoba Beef Producers, BC Cattlemen Association, BCRC, all those folks. And we can take that $1 you give us as checkoff, I can leverage that threefold with Ottawa, with Tri-Council funding, we call it NSERC. And that can just give me more dollars to do a better job of meeting those objectives of that study. So flax, and we grow a lot of it in Saskatchewan, and so I'll talk a little bit about it as a fiber source or The seed itself, it's a very useful plant. There's been ways of looking at the straw, which is really a problem to get rid of if you grow flax. But the real thing here is the seed, used as a protein sup, but the oil is the one that we're going to look at as an energy source to put into that beef cow diet. There it is. And so the oil itself, linseed oil, is PUFA, or polyunsaturated fatty acid, which means there's more than one double bond. Okay? But it's a great energy source. And so, we grow a lot of this cash crop, canola, flax in Saskatchewan. Is there some way, other than just marketing it as a cash crop, can we integrate some of that into a beef cow diet? For a good thing, for a good cause. Why flax? Well, because it contains all those nice fuzzy pickle things that you health-conscious people think about, right? Alpha-linolenic acid? Oh, here's some omega-3, right, in the polyunsaturated fatty acid. It's a precursor for eicosanoids, which are precursors to hormones, right, estrogen, progesterone. And they play an essential role in the immune system. So those are good things. Anti-inflammatory of certain PUFAs. And, Drewler did some work. That's a US, I believe it's Kansas scientist from quite a few years ago. Fed it 5 months pre-slaughter and reduced inflammation and the need for antibiotics. And so, linseed oil, flaxseed, okay, lot of positive things. It's not normally grown for hay or forage, and the straw is of very low quality. And this is the nasty, is it does contain that prussic acid as a green crop, okay? So we don't want to have that happen, because the prussic hits the rumen bugs convert it to hydrogen cyanide gas. That's not good for the cow. I spent 2021 was a drought year, and 2022 is shaping up to be year 2. And I spent, I don't know how many conversations or webinars I did on salvage crops, on just finding fiber for the beef herds. And so we're talking about grazing kochia, slough hay, ditch hay, canola that didn't mature, right? So it's fiber, and it'll fit into a beef cow diet, and maybe even flax or lentils or anything. So that was the real ticket. But the straw's not very good, but you might be able to sup it off with some grain or mineral or vitamin A. And the other thing is we did some research on straw to just bump up the protein, so ammoniation. And when we get into a drought situation in some areas, we start talking about improving the poor quality fiber by ammoniation. It breaks those cellular-lignin bonds, and it bumps up the protein content. It's going to be a different approach, right? But yeah, it might obviously increase the nutritive value of that fiber. But straw, whether it's flax, barley, oat, whatever, we know is deficient in a lot of nutrients, right? Very low in energy, protein, minerals, and specifically vitamin A, right? RPs, retained placentas, all those things. So we don't want that. And it's poorly digested. Poorly digested. Failure to, and we had a lot of guys, I talked to a lot of guys last fall just trying to come up with a straw-based diet to get their cattle through this winter. What can I do, Bart? And so looking at some type of energy protein sup to build in there, 19 pounds per head per day. That's where you're going to get impaction. That's not a good thing, okay? So there's only 1.2% NDF is what that cow can eat per day. Okay, so these are some numbers we need to think about when we're trying to push that straw at her, right? You're going to wind up in big time trouble. Thin cows, you don't want that. And there's that impaction. 16 to 18, you can probably be on the verge, but once you get above that, you're going to start to look at impaction issues. And the other thing too is we get into those cold weather days where our energy requirements ramp up big time. So some work, there's some nutrient value of straw types. Here you have flax, barley, oat, and wheat. Energy, TDN, total additional nutrients, is just a unit of energy. 40 is not a good number, folks. We want to see that 60 to 70. That's a respectable number. right, of the quality of your hay or your silage or whatever your fiber is. So very low TDN, very low energy. Crude protein's very low as well, right? 4% is too low. When your basal diet gets about below 6-7% protein, you're not feeding the rumen bugs. She's not going to perform. You're not feeding the cow, you're feeding the rumen bugs. Remember that, right? And so what can I do? Because they're going to make microbial protein, there's going to be some bypass protein, and some endogenous protein, and it's really metabolizable protein that we should be looking at, not crude protein. But certainly pay attention to the protein value. So all these straws are very low in energy, protein, and high in fiber. That's really what that table is telling us. So that needs supplementation. So they did some work actually at Lanigan. Man did some work quite a bit ago looking at ammoniating flax straw. Just ammoniating it, tried to bump up or increase the nutrient value of it. And for sure that's what happened. Okay, so flax straw with no ammoniation sitting about 3% protein, but once that ammoniation happened, it bumped it up to 8%. And there was lots of conversations going on this fall about ammoniation of very low quality hay, fiber, whatever, right? So in drought situations, we're reaching. We're turning over every stone, talking to a lot of folks, just trying to get that feeding program going. As well, you can see daily gain also improved when those cows were fed that ammoniated treated flax straw. And so that just tells me that the protein requirements for those cows was being met with that poor quality straw that in fact bumped up because of the ammoniation process. What about other things when we put fat into the ruminant diet? Undernutrition in postpartum beef cows increases the time to onset of ovarian activity and first estrus. That's just what I talked about, postpartum interval, right? So you think about it, from the time she calves, she's got 82 days to cycle and catch, to give you a calf every 365. So 282 gestation, 283 gestation, 82 days to cycle, rebreed to give you that calf every 365. We see a lot of cows that are late cyclers, and they get that PPI, or that calving span, if you like, is 400, 420. Oh, she gives me, you just keep her in the herd, right? But she's falling out of sync. You don't have that nice, tight, uniform group of calves to market. So fat in the diet, and so there's been, the jury's been out whether there was some studies showed a direct positive, some no effect on repro efficiency. And the other thing that we looked at with fat supplementation, and this goes back to when I was in grad school, I was at Lethbridge and I did a 6 months term there with Mir and Mir, two scientists, and we were just trying to increase conjugated linoleic acid in the carcass, CLA. Some of you remember that. But the problem is, and it's with any of these things that we do in the research world, are you getting paid? Are you getting compensated for that extra time or whatever you do? Age verification, right? Are you getting paid because you increase the CLA content in the carcass of the critter that you didn't own? So again, you have to think about that. Essential fatty acids. And so now I'm going to talk about some of the good things about why we should pay attention to omega-3 and omega-6, and why beef is a good source, right? A very good source. So flax has polyunsaturated fatty acid, which I said, and it's very high in that omega-3 to 6 ratio. So we want to have a high 3 and a lower 6. Okay? Omega-6, omega-3, essential fatty acids in our diet. Beef is a fantastic source, consumption of beef, because it's high in the N3 fatty acid, right? The only problem is, and it doesn't show up that well in the bottom, is that in our Western Canadian diets of fast food, we tend to get too much omega-6. So maybe a lot of our diets in the 3 to 6 ratio, or 6 to 3 ratio, are sitting 20 to 1, when it should be more like 4 to 1. Okay? So eat more beef, but I'm preaching to the choir here today, I'm sure. So what about these guys? And that's a typical one of our projects at Lanigan. I was just utilizing straw chaff, oat, pea, and just trying to supplement pregnant beef cows out there. It's Manavana Kirko's work, actually. But you know what? This is the other thing that we looked at, is that the nutrition of the pregnant dam in second and third trimester is important. In fact, the programming of the fetus occurs, the hypertrophy and the number of muscle fibers are determined in first trimester. So you can influence the growth of them later on. And so, is there some way we can manipulate dam diet nutrient density in second and third trimester to possibly improve performance of the progeny? That's the question, right? And it occurs in many, many species, including beef cattle. And here's something to think about. You are what your mother ate. That's scary, isn't it? Fetal programming, developmental programming, we call it, or what grandma ate, epigenetics, right? A lot of conversations about this today. And so is there some way we can manipulate dam diet to maybe have a positive influence on the unborn fetus, or maybe the calf when it hits the ground? And so we look at the nutrient content of these different fat sources. There you have flax, canola, soybean, sunflower, cottonseed, and pretty darn good energy. Remember that 40% energy of straw, TDN? It's ranging what? 91 to 120, right? So all of a sudden, 2.5 times more in fat than carbohydrates, right? So fat's a good energy to bring into your diet. And of course, pretty good protein, ranging from 17 to 23. And so, yeah, just gives you a characterization of the different fat types. Let's just say that. That's what that table is doing. And so, you look at that for flax, it's a pretty darn good candidate. So we can influence body weight by having that fat supplement in the diet. We can influence body condition, milk composition, conception rate, pubertal age, okay, by putting fat in the diet of that open replacement. Does she reach pubertal age quicker sooner than her counterparts? Possibly. Mammary development, birth weight, weaning weight. So this is just a snapshot of literally hundreds of studies that have been done. That's what we're saying. Okay, here's another study that was done. Prepartum supplementation of fat. Some Bellows work. Actually, Bellows is my mentor. He's one of the first cow-calf scientists down there in South Dakota. So you look at the evolution of research in Canada. It all started in that North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and then we started to figure out, you know what, a lot of that research is very applicable to us in Western Canada. May not be to you folks in Maritimes, but certainly we can utilize a lot of those findings. And so here's just some work that he did. Here's the diets: control, safflower, soybean, or sunflower with the different sources of fat. And certainly, as you can see, where's my pointer? There it is. It increased percent cycling. And, oh, had a positive effect on preg rates, right? Supplementing a source of polyunsaturated inhibited the secretion of prostaglandin, increasing survival of CL, and prostaglandin level, improving embryo survival. Some really early work that's done by Staples and Matos, and also influenced the level of fatty acid profile of the milk. Here's some Lamagolia work. High-fat sups 5.2 had greater positive effect on cow repro performance compared to low-fat sups with similar energy content. So a lot of that background we looked at and said, okay, you know what, can we do something in Saskatchewan to look at developmental programming and utilize a co-product of the cropping industry from canola or flax and feed it to cows that are pregnant in the winter. And so there is our objective: can feeding different fat source, type, and form So flax or canola or PUFA and MUFA to pregnant cows second, third trimester of pregnancy affect cow and calf performance. This was a 2-year study at Tremunde, at Lanigan, my old lab, Tremunde Research Ranch. And so it's all about, can we manipulate that little guy on the right? Yeah, I got some Angus pictures in here just by chance. I didn't intend this. In fact, I get pushback from some of my students because I have no Hereford pictures in my slides for the Hereford girls that are in the crowd. Effects of maternal nutrition status during gestation on offspring performance has been attributed to fetal programming and or epigenetics effects. So there's been lots of work done. Do actually is a really good paper to see about what is developed in the first trimester, the second trimester, and the third of that fetus, right? What's being laid down. And suggests that those changes occurring are based on the dam nutrient supply. So what's in the diet? And can we manipulate the type and form of fat? And so here's our treatments. We had a barley-based diet. Barley's the go-back cereal in Saskatchewan, right? You folks, Ontario's corn, I know. But we're seeing a lot of corn come up. But really, so barley is the primary cereal. So that was our control diet. And then we brought in a pelleted-based fat sup, starting from either canola seed or flax seed. And we put that out there daily. We looked at the literature. We're going to hit that 300 gram per head per day, because that's what a lot of the dairy work had did and shown a positive response, okay? This is my PhD student, Federico Anez. And what does that isocaloric and isonitrogenous mean? Fancy word, scientific word. It just means they're balanced for energy and protein. That's all it means. There's our schedule over the 2 years. And so we started at 182 days pre-calving. And there's the second trimester and the third trimester. And that's all the data we collected. So we collected data while they were being fed and pregnant. And we collected data once the calf hit the ground, all the way out to weaning. And then we followed these calves that were born to these dams all the way to slaughter, okay? So body weight, body condition, short chain fat, or subcutaneous fatty tissue. Basically, we took rib and rump fat. SCFT and SCAT mean. Bloods, looking at blood metabolites. So BHBA, right, indicators of energy status, those types of things. And then we followed them through and we looked at the fat content in adipose tissue, milk, blood, all these things. Here's the ingredients of the pelleted supplement that was fed, and you can see here, there's our canola pellet, there's our flax pellet. And as I said, 8 to 9% fat, probably a little bit too high because the rumen bugs can't function properly. So we were sitting on average, what? About 7.5% fat inclusion in the diet. Here's the comp of the diet. Okay, what were they being fed? A typical diet for Saskatchewan. There's your fiber, right? Level of grass hay and barley straw. Here's bringing in some grain and canola meal just to bump up the protein in our control diet. And of course, there's the pelleted subs, okay? They're outdoor pens. We took all those measured. We milked black Angus cows for the first time. I can't tell you the number of meetings we had with the farm ranch staff to ease their worries. You know Stacy Joe? Yeah, you just ask her about this one. Her job was to keep the cats out of the milk pail. Anyway, fun times. And then we followed the calves through too. So birth body weight, daily gain, weaning weight, and feedlot performance. And we also were looking at, okay, if the level, the type and form of fat in the dam diet in the second, third trimester is influencing some genes, whether they are being expressed or not expressed, right? Whether there's methylation going on there or not. And so that was the other part of this study we looked with Dr. Carolyn Fitzsimmons at University of Alberta. That work is still being looked at. Okay, how do we do? Here's the beef cow performance over 2 years. and I'm sorry to bore you with stats, but we do a single degree of freedom contrast, just looking at was there a treatment effect on the parameter we're looking at or not. And everything that's less than 0.05, we would suggest that there was a treatment effect. I look at these numbers, these two columns here on the right, there's nothing less than 0.05, so there was no negative effect of these diets on gestation, body weight, daily gain of the cows, or even calving body weight of the cows. Okay, so that's a good thing. You don't want to have a negative influence. We did increase CLA in the adipose tissue of these cows, okay? So here's its start, and there you can see it increasing. Here's our control, here's our canola and our flax diet. So we increased that in the adipose tissue. This is what interests us the most, was the birth body weights of the calves, okay? Here's the both sexes together, and here we singled out the girls and the boys. And we saw a response on those contrasts of treatment. So greater birth body weight of calves born to cows that received either canola or flax fat source. Interesting. How about the, here's the steer calves. Okay, let's focus on the boys. Birth body weights were greater than our barley diet, right? So there's that less than 0.05 deal. And at 3 weeks of age, that tendency still happened, positive. Here we have at 42 days, and there we have at wean weight. So the ADG was greater than the control. CLA profile of the milk influenced as well. And repro performance, this is a really interesting thing too, is we saw more cows get pregnant following when they were fed that diet. Right? So we went back to that old data. We just repeated, right? We validated some of that old research studies that have been shown about fat inclusion in the diet, having a positive response on fertility, and specifically conception or preg rates. That's a good thing. Cow repro, this is just a bar graph of the same boring table data, okay? There you go. So, question was, can we repeat it? So that was 2 years of data. We looked at the economics of it. In some years, it was economically feasible to build that canola or flax pellet to feed to your cows in a supplemental program. In some years, it wasn't. So it really depends on the price of hay or the price of fiber. But as we speak, we're just finishing year 1 of a 3-year study, trying to repeat that particular work. Go back to flax straw, ammoniation of that, obviously increased protein content twofold. And obviously, cows that were fed that ammoniated flax straw, their ADG increased. So just good things about PUFA in the diet. It's very high in protein, excellent source of energy, whether it's from flax or from canola. And so an interesting, we don't want it to just to be a one-op. That's why we're trying to repeat it. So it's very important in research to look at repeatability. We don't want to be going out and telling the producer, Bob or Betty, that, you know, if you do this, you're going to get more, because you sell pounds of calf. Don't anybody tell you otherwise, right? So we're just trying to repeat it, and so we make sure that we feel confident in our implications. And it seemed at about that less than 10%, actually we were at 7.5% of diet in our study. Yeah, and so we're still looking at work with that particular study. So that's just gives you something to think about, is that, you know, some of you may buy pelleted supplements from wherever. I don't know if there's feed mills out here or your nutritionists are trying to sell you the silver bullet, but just look at maybe what the type and form of where that energy come from. And is it going to be beneficial to my pregnant animal, and will it maybe respond and have a positive effect on those unborn calves? So that's my first conversation, just something to think about. The second conversation is the pushback that we're getting as a beef industry on on GHGs. And who knew I'd be getting into this area? But I'm in it as a researcher. And so I did a webinar for AgWest Bio back when we were in lockdown in June of 2020. And you know that carbon emission levels went down when we quit traveling planes, trains, and automobiles, but the same number of cows were still kicking around. So, you know, you think about where do these emissions come from? And you can go on, this is from SCA, BCRC has some great facts. So we're about 2.4%. And then here's the energy needers, okay? So they're a little bit higher, as you can see. But, you know, past research done by BCRC, a lot of really good scientists, just shows that the, you know, you go from 1981 footprint to 2011, producing the same amount of beef, produced 15% less greenhouse gases than 1981. Beef cattle.
Just the cows themselves, or does that include tractors used to feed those cows?
That's just the beef herd. Oh, he was asking about that 2.4%. That's just the animals themselves, okay? Right. That's including use of carbon to keep them alive or feed them or whatever. And, you know, and we heard about this with the last speaker, is that you guys have resources, you're managing them the best you can with decades of experience. And so, you know, and you talk to many ranchers, they're trying to leave the land in better shape than when they inherited it to their succession plan. I mean, I'm talking to the choir here today. So, you know, and you look at other numbers on a global scale, we're 0.04%. And which only accounts for about 2.4% of Canada's GHG emissions. You know, and the things that drive me nuts is you go on social media and they're going on talking about cow farts and all this other nonsense. Like, for crying out loud, cows eructate. It comes out the front door, okay? It's the burping process. You know, there's lots of producers, lots of scientists that will say that those critters out there in the landscape are utilizing those high fiber crops, native rangeland. They're upcyclers. They're converting it to saleable meat protein with the use of that symbiotic relationship of the rumen microflora. That is a unique system, a unique system. And the rumen is the big fermentation chamber. It's the biggest one of the four stomachs, right? So that's very important, is utilizing, getting some saleable product off that acre of land that otherwise wouldn't be there. Now I'm going to bore you with a little bit of biology or biochem, if you like, but we talked about those volatile fatty acids, those short-chain fatty acids. What happens when that beef cow consumes the plant material, and specifically the cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin, is it breaks it down, the rumen bugs do. They attach and release their enzymes, and it's through that breakdown process in the rumen that there's some byproducts, these VFAs, or volatile fatty acids, or short-chain fatty acids. And the three we look at are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. However, when you look at, and they all have a role in that breakdown process. What is left behind? Hydrogen ions and CO2. So that breakdown of the plant material produces a lot of hydrogen ions, which have a reductive process. And if too many of them build up in the rumen, that slows down digestion. So this system is built to get rid of those darn hydrogen ions. How does it do it? Well, there's these guys called methanogens in the bacteria species in the rumen. And they make methane. Okay? And also, when we produce this one volatile fatty acid, acetate, it produces twice the number of hydrogen ions as butyrate does. So these contribute hydrogen ions to that pool. Propionate is the good one we talked about a previous slide. It actually uses up some of the hydrogen ions. So that's why we're always talking about the the acetate to propionate ratio when we look at diets, okay? Because we want to see more of this than we do of that. Where do we see a higher level of propionate being produced? What kind of a diet? You feedlot people. A high grain diet. So the feedlot boys have got to step up on us cow-calf guys. We see a lot of propionate being produced in a high grain diet. On a cow-calf side, which is out in that pasture grazing those forages, we see a lot more acetate being produced. Okay, so that's why the focus is on the cow-calf sector in 2022 as a contributor to methane. We're trying to mitigate those practices. We're trying to reduce the level of methane. So, and how do we do that? Strategies. We can reduce the hydrogen ions in the rumen, or we can inhibit formation of methane by the methanogens, right? How can we stop that in the rumen? Well, in a sustainable manner too, right? So these energy, and this methane that's eructated represents about 12% of the gross energy of her diet. That's a huge energy loss, right? So it's not a closed system. The ruminant digestive system is not a closed system, but it's a system that functions to utilize low-quality, high-fiber roughages, right? The rumen evolved over evolutions on native rangeland, right? So, unfortunately, is that we're seeing some of that gross energy being lost. Here we can see that. So how do we reduce enteric methane production? By feeding fat. We heard about that. I went on about, we heard legume conversations this morning, right? So putting legumes, a higher quality pasture diet is a good thing versus a low quality pasture diet. Ionophores, right? Feed those. They'll produce more propionate than acetate to your cows, bovine, rumensin, etc. High grain diets. And so you're just taking some of the energy that might be lost and converting into more meat and more milk. And just gave some prediction numbers here, 20% reduction in methane in Canada would decrease the GHGs by ag by 6%, or total GHGs by 0.5%. So now you're wondering, well, how the heck does BART measure cow burps? And it's not cheap, let me tell you that. So there's two techniques we use. This is the first one. It's called sulfur hexafluoride, SF6, and we put these nice necklaces on them. They hate them like poison. So we have a 3 or 4 day adaptation period where they either go backwards 100 miles an hour or they get used to them. And it's basically, it's a negative pressure vacuum yoke. And then we strap this nice harness on them, and so we're picking up the nasal vapors, right? So all the emissions that are coming out the front end, and they'll go through tubing and be captured in this 1 liter negative pressure yoke. And we'll switch those off every 24 hours, and we'll do that over a 5-6 day period. So we get an estimate of the methane being produced by that critter on that pasture type. Very intensive labor. I got a dozen people in my lab group. You can see the girls there out working the boys. For some reason, I got more female grad students than males. But they've been doing a bang-up job for me in doing our SF6 work. The other way of measuring is a more modern approach. This has been around since the 1980s. And so we actually intubate them with a perm tube. We call it a tube that's infiltrated with sulfur hexafluoride gas, and we put it into the reticulum, and so it's that release we're measuring of SF6 and CH4 in our gas samples. The other one is it's called a green feeder. It comes out of Rapid City, South Dakota, and some wise engineers down there figured out this is going to be needed by us scientists, dudes, and we put these out. It's a trailer, and so we lure the critter to the trailer with a pellet bait. So we need her head in that chamber for about 2 minutes to capture her nasal vapors in real time. So again, an adaptation period. And so we need about 20 visits over a 7-day period to be accurate and make sure that the data we're collecting is validated. And so it just kind of gives you an idea. You folks have never really figured out how do we measure CH4 and CO2 and other things. That's a couple of techniques we use. Those are about 160 US, so not cheap. Here's another thing you could probably put in your back pocket is, you know, the methane eructated and emitted by the beef cow, and I follow the greenhouse gas guru. That's Frank Mitterlehner out of UC Davis, great source. Is that here's the cow burping the methane, it goes up in the atmosphere, and every 10 years it's converted to CO2. By at least over 10 years it's converted back to CO2. And guess what takes up CO2? The forage plants through photosynthesis. So that methane that these guys are eructating is recycled back, people. What about the methane produced from the fossil fuels that we're burning, or industry's burning, or the Toronto citizens are burning? It's saturated the oceans. Okay, so unfortunately, social media is not helping us, but I think the finger pointing is going in the wrong direction. My last slide is just some novel approaches to mitigate GHGs coming out the front end of a beef cow. We've looked at several techniques. I'm looking at some legume work right now. We have sandfoin and cicer and alfalfa in some pasture systems. The girls are going to start that on Thursday. Our critters are going out to grass. I've looked at another opportunity called biochar. How many people have heard of biochar? It's a soil remediation. Some conversations there. We fed it to them as a pelleted supplement. Some of the lab work done at Ag Canada Lethbridge showed some promise, but we're not seeing that validated in the field. And so we're kind of looking at other things. There's a new one coming out called 3-NOP, 3-NOP. Its trade name is called Bovaer, and it's owned by DSM, which is a Dutch company, and it's only available in Europe. A lot of things are only available in Europe. I'm doing some multi-min injectable mineral work right now, which is only available in Europe. But so stay tuned. We're trying to get multi-min for you guys here in Canada. Anyway, so that one's hanging out there like a matzo ball. I don't see it coming at us very quickly. And so conversations we've been having with you folks over the last few months is this other one, seaweed business. Who'd have thunk, right? It's been around for decades. We've been feeding seaweed to ruminants, those maritime provinces, areas, different types. There's red, blue, and green. The early work that's been done on seaweed supplementation to beef cows to reduce enteric emissions is positive. It's very promising. The couple things the scientists don't tell us, though, which I learned about with a Zoom call with Dr. Critchley from France, is you want to probably find a source of seaweed, Asparagopsis taxiformis, that is readily available. This is not available, the red one. Okay? So they do the research, and yeah, it reduces methane by 90%, but it's not readily available. So that's no good for us, is it? So we want to find a source that's going to be there, grown to scale, if you like, commercially available. We're talking to other companies right now, Atlantic Canada, kind of a sidebar while I'm out here. And in my mind, it may not be just one type, it may be a blend. So a synergistic of maybe brown and red or something like that. Okay. This is proof of concept stuff I'm talking about here. I was just asked to speak about it today just to finish up. And what it is that it's the bromoform level in the seaweed that is actually stopping that enzymatic reaction to produce the methane. So, and you don't want too much. And when we feed too high level of the seaweed, we see a negative intake, negative response on dry matter intake. That's a bad thing. So it's about what level can it be at, and we don't need to have 90%. In my mind, even if 40% reduction, that's a good thing. But it's all about proof of concept. Does it work? Is it available? And the next thing is it something the producer Bob or Betty can do? Don't know. But in my world, it's just we need to investigate this stuff. So. With that, I'll end my conversation. Feel free to follow me. I got a lot of videos online, talk about a lot of the work we've done, and you can shut me off after 2 minutes, which you couldn't do this morning. Thank you for your time.
Have
any questions for Dr. Lartner? If you could put your, I'll come
Yes, sir.
to you, Greg, so that people online can hear you.
Yeah, really good presentation. You know, I quite enjoyed that. I guess my question probably goes back more to the fat content and feeding. Yes, there's obviously lots of good data there, and you know that was a really good eye-opener just to understand those concepts. Now, when we get into crops like flax or canola meal was not readily available in Western Canada this year at all, so it's kind of a non-starter. Flax is worth $40 a bushel. Has there been some research looking into other crops such as kochia that has a high enough fat content? It's obviously a weed, just more of a viability piece. I mean, I like the science, it makes perfect sense, but it's going to be a cost problem moving forward.
Yeah.
So is there, you know, viability to look into other crops? I mean, I'm going to use it as the example, but is there other species out there that we could be harvesting to utilize for these cattle that are maybe least cost scenario?
No, great question, absolutely. When we do that study, when we do any of our research, it's our findings in the year and the location we did it in. And so when I do a study, we find out, yeah, there's a benefit and this is what it costs, but that's my costs. What are your costs? And a lot of producers don't want to put their hand up because they don't know their cost of production. But you're right, and some of these crops, the value of them as a cash crop is far outweighs the co-product. And so what are other opportunities? Kochia, possibly, but the darn thing about kochia, it's got oxalates and it ties up calcium. But you know, a lot of cows ate kochia hay this fall in Western Canada. So you can dilute that. It grows like crazy everywhere. The other thing that popped into my head is that we did some work with an oat variety that was a potential, a high fat, growth, low lignin oat out of Crop Development Center out of U of S, and it's probably the best kept secret. It was called Super Oat or SO1. Dr. Brian Rossnagle, the Forage breeder, developed it, and we did the research, and we showed that if you fed that as an energy source to backgrounding calves without processing it, right? Because that's another cost, is you have to process the oat, right? Crack it. Those calves gain similar to a barley diet that was processed. So the good thing about the high fat growth, low lignin oat was that you didn't need to process it. So there's another SO1 oat is what it is. I don't know if you can get your hands on it. I think some Manitoba folks are growing it. I don't know if Ontario people are growing it. But it was just one of those things where the value was there, but you know, the breeders or the folks that were growing it, you know, it was, you know, hard to get your hands on it. So yeah, you're right. So yes, we can probably investigate other crop types. Love to. We just need to have that conversation and go forward. I really thought that biochar deal was going to take off, but because it's basically biochar is like a charcoal, and it comes from pine, it comes from wood, right? So there's a readily available resource that we as producers can look at, but it's not showing a lot of difference right now. There, let the cat out of the bag. Other questions, comments? Some forage questions. I like forage questions. Yes, sir.
We utilize a lot of straw in our rations in the fall for our cow herd. Done it for 60 years. It's processed by the combine. Have a deal we pull behind the combine that just dumps it out randomly in about ton piles. And when I tell most nutritionists that's all our cows get, for the first 40 years of that, their hair becomes the same color as yours. Lately, we've, because of fetal programming, we've gone to using some protein lick tubs with that. That's all those cows get other than salt and mineral, as long as we're above -20.
Yeah. Where are you at?
South of Calgary, about an hour.
Okay.
Right up against the foothills. So we would be a little bit more moderate than we are in most places in Western Canada. Yeah. If it gets below -20 for an extended period, we'll supplement with a bit of alfalfa hay. just to mitigate
protein, feed the bugs.
And mitigate impaction when they try to consume more because of the temperature. But and essentially, we graze quarters and half sections that way. We don't have to mess around with electric fences or whatever. When the combine pulls out of that field, it's ready to go, and those cows just get turned in there. So essentially, it costs us whatever the energy requirement of that bit of machinery on the back of the combine is. I don't understand why we don't utilize more of this.
I totally agree with you. You know, when I give my talk about the benefits or the amount of ammonium and nitrate, nitrogen, and phosphorus that's left behind in manure nutrients by a cow per day, and we did that work, we saw a threefold increase in nitrogen out in that field where those cows were wintered, and the subsequent crop rejuvenating. And that after I do that talk, and then you're paying the cropping guy to have your critters on his land, he should be paying you because you're leaving behind so much good stuff, right? So, but we have guys like you out in Saskatchewan, Dwayne Thompson, I don't know if you know Dwayne or not, but he believes in chaff grazing, and and then you can fall, depending on the color of your combine, some cows will get more nutrients out the back door versus other ones, so.
And one additional comment, when it is dry like this right now, it's an exceptional management tool because we can turn up the wind a bit. We essentially screen off the extremely light grain so we can improve the bushel weights of that grain, make it more marketable, and yet still don't lose the value of that lighter material in the cow's ration. In the spring, we heavy harrow it once and go in there and air seed it. There's no additional things to it. I just don't grasp it.
I don't either.
And we get 3 or 4 months essentially free of our year for a cow herd of 400 cows. So.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. I mean, it's the same with the cropping guys with the GPS and tractors and stuff, and they're seeding into salinity acres. This is the next big thing is the salinity issue we have, and so they're putting in wheat that's not going to grow. Their input costs, right? They should be growing a forage, a saline-tolerant legume or a grass species, and at least you get something off that 40 acres, they can feed the the local cows or something. So yeah, it's a mental block. We just have to keep banging on the door, I think. Good, very good point.
That lunch is being served. I'm just going to remind you all that lunch is on the left side. It's actually, please don't eat from the right side because that's somebody else's event. But please join me in thanking Dr. Lartner first.
Yes, yeah, I'm actually going to...
Everybody on DLMS, so we will be back at 1:30, so about an hour and 20 minutes from now. Hour and 10 minutes from now. Please look forward to being back here. We'll be back on Facebook as well as back on DLMS. We appreciate everybody being with us. We'll be back in about an hour and 10 minutes.